Welcome to a Wonder Junkie podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Anderson.
Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows. Nobody has the faintest idea. The best guesses are lies. You may be sure of it.
So I wanted to do an introduction to this podcast, and I had to wait 5 days to do the introduction because I lost my voice. I had James fly out on a Friday, and I lost my voice the day that we were doing the episode. So I went through with it anyway because he was out here, and it's pretty rough. I had a pretty raspy voice, and I couldn't really speak. So the introduction is just so you can get a little bit of an overview of how I met him. We were introduced through a mutual friend who had been down to the Amazon jungle to Spirit Quest and met Don Howard. Years before I had met Howard. I met Howard towards the end of his life, and I met James through a friend that had been down there, and she said that I should meet him and have him on the podcast. And James has lived a very interesting life, and he's going to say a lot of things in this episode that are probably new to most people listening. And I myself have dove into the subject matter pretty deeply, and I've read many books. Operation Mind Control by Walter Bowart, who he claims he spent years with and lived with and learned a lot from. He says he helped republish a new edition of his book, and I've read many other books, Chaos, The Manchurian Candidate by John Marks, and I've just dove in deep into the subject matter. I find social engineering fascinating, and nature of consciousness fascinating, and what people do with the information that they know about the nature of consciousness to shape culture. And this conversation is probably one of the weirdest I've had. And I think you should just listen with an open mind. It doesn't mean that everything that's said here is true, but it's a person's perspective and interpretation of reality. And he seems to have lived a very interesting life and carried quite a burden of holding a lot of information in his brain about the way that the world is. So anyway, I'm a person that's genuinely curious, and I love to learn and seek truth. And I'm willing to talk to pretty much anyone about anything. I love to expose myself to new ideas, and this was definitely a fascinating conversation. It was just really frustrating because of my voice and not being able to speak or have the back and forth dialogue. So enjoy the episode. Don't forget to rate the show on iTunes and Spotify and share the episode. That really helps people to find it. And I hope you enjoy.
Well, thank you for coming to Arizona. Nice to meet you in person.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We have a mutual friend, Don Howard, that connected us in a way, and we've had the opportunity this morning to have a nice breakfast and coffee and then hours of just connecting, learning about each other, and it's been really nice. So I figured it would be time now to hit record and share some of your journey and your story, and I'm going to learn from you in real time and share this with whoever's lucky enough to hear it.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess I'd love to start with Walter Bowart, but before we get to Operation Mind Control and the Bowart story, and you were very close with him, I would say you said his best friend. I want to know more about when you sent me your bio, basically, your resume. I was shocked at how long it was and how interesting it was and how the languaging in it were so new to me. Brain-computer interface linguistics. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about that, like maybe give the audience a little brief overview of your bio, and then we'll start how you even got on that path a little bit, and we'll go through some of the trajectory and how you ended up pretty much getting so close to Walter.
My bio. Well, a lot of people, I'll hear about people saying, well, what do you do exactly? And I hear that a lot for a long time. And it's not really comprised of one thing specifically, but a better question I would ask that would make more sense is, what am I here to do? What am I here doing? Well, what's driving me? What's my purpose for even doing this or what's pushing me forward. That would really be, I'd say, to move culture is what I'm doing. If somebody asks me about my biography, it's always been in some form moving culture to something better than what it was before. But to others, I'll say, well, I'm a media ecologist, and hopefully they may understand what that means, but usually they don't. And then I would say that I study and forecast what effects are going to occur when new technologies are distributed in the public and culture at large, and what those effects are going to be for better or for worse, and how that's going to affect ultimately how we deal with each other and how we move forward in life. And because that's what I'm really doing. But the birth of that came from a long, long time ago, just learning how culture and behavior works. I was always interested in how people arrive to where they're at, how they got to their beliefs, why they think that way. I was always interested in how it came to be, what were the elements that got all that to be. So that was an interesting way to enter one of my best teachers' life. So when people ask me, what's your biography? It's been working with the cultural engineers, so to speak, that have made impact on certain things. Specifically, I would say freedom of thought, and what it means to be a whole, self-realized person on the planet, making self-determination, and trying to get to a better place than where they were. So that's a long answer, but usually I'll just say media ecologists, and I'll get right to the point, because they still won't understand what that means. Because ultimately the end point of most of what I've done is to make the world a better place in a smarter way, in a more engaging way, so that it would be decided by a group rather than a few people to decide what is best for what's next. But that's a longer way of describing if you read what I put there.
Sure.
Because it was, I was extremely privileged to see how culture has been formed from a sociological, engineered impact of people that have affected how cultures created our value systems and ultimately how we treat each other. Lucky because I grew up all over the world and I've traveled a lot. I'm always interested in seeing new cultures and hearing what they have to say and how they do things and why they think that way, and what happens when those other cultures meet each other for some higher purpose. So that's an explanation of what someone would understand if they read my resume, because it's been behind the scenes where I've participated in moving culture very loudly.
Yeah.
But I didn't, it wasn't to get gold medal or for fame or for any of that, really. It was more out of concern of where we are going as a species, and what freedom really means for everybody. I've been lucky enough to know some of the biggest freedom fighters of all time, and they've been good friends and colleagues. And that's, if I were to describe my soul, which is the embodiment of my life's work, that would be the kind of the heart of it.
That's
really
beautiful. Yeah, and it's amazing. This morning I lost my voice, but it's amazing I've lost it today. You described Russell Means, how close you were with him, Walter Bowart, these key figures, and it's like you inherited this fascinating life as you went on, and it just kept leading you down these different avenues, which gave you more insight, which led you to more people with more information, which it's just a fascinating thing to unpack. And right now you're sitting as like the chief of, what was your position right now? It's hard to describe.
Well, I'm in an advisory capacity for what's being called today the brain-computer interface for a particular group of people in Washington that determine what the international standards are for technology deployment and how countries and cultures decide how technology is going to be distributed. It employs a lot of different things, from safety standards to size to what type of wall unit. It can be anything in a technology way, so that if it's mutually shared throughout the world, that all the industry and standards are agreed upon. So these are global conversations with multiple countries that are determining standardizations of what technology will ultimately do when it interfaces with each other. So these are very, very big decision-making decisions that are made by certain select people. And I was invited and asked to be in that position because of my history having to do with the kind of exposure of MKUltra and my work that I did with Walter Bowart, who wrote Operation Mind Control. Most people don't really know that. They know the word MKUltra, but they don't know who, what, how too much. They know the neuroscience and they've seen all the movies, and it's a very common knowledge name, but they haven't really examined, and they don't really know who did that and how it was done and why, and what the end goals were in terms of what Walter Bowart and I wanted to warn or re-engineer or give a chance for the world to make a decision about. And that's ultimately today here, once arriving here, it's we're at the precipice point now, from in the early 90s, me, Walter Bowart, our board members that were on the Freedom of Thought Foundation, which were made up of Fletcher Prouty, Colonel Fletcher Prouty, Colonel Tom Bearden. We had an attorney on there that was experimented on, an Irish attorney. We had psychologists, psychiatrists. All of us were advisors on, because all of us knew that the end game of what was going to be done to the public would be ultimately the fusion of brain, computer, AI, and quantum, and what would happen when these things were fused together. So in the 90s, we were discussing all that, and I was way younger back then and way more optimistic. And I never thought that the day would arrive where this is where we are. And it's highly, highly relevant, even more so than ever. And it's going to be even more so after I finish doing this, because of announcements that have occurred in the last 48 hours with Palantir, and with new technologies that are coming out having to do with essentially behavior modification and the end of, shall we say, cognitive liberty, the right to have your own thoughts, the right to exercise your free speech, the right to determine how your spirit navigates through the world without interference. All these things are on the table now. And we were kind of the first people to warn of this. There was the first book was written in 1978, and he did
John Marks.
the first book, meaning the declaration of proving that MKUltra and behavior modification sciences they're operational. They're being used. That was Operation Mind Control, because prior to that, you just had agency people come out and said, yeah, we experimented on people when you used some drugs, and we did this, and I'm like, goodbye, we're not going to talk about it anymore. They never got to the point where something was proven that these things were going on and were actually utilized for all sorts of things. And his book was the kind of the stamp going down. And it was his last book. It was his first book published and his last book published, because it changed his life massively. I was part of the volume 2, which I gave my testimony to him, and it was the follow-up to the original with new data and findings that we had, which we put into the special researcher's edition, which is thoroughly exploited on all over the web, and even sold by other companies that didn't call us about it. So these were the tools way back when, in that type of communication system that we're in, because the internet wasn't really around then, and we maybe printed 500 books of the second volume. That was to special researchers that were in tune of what was going on, because what we knew was going on in the 90s now is in full in front of your face scenario, because we had the full game plan of what the powers of the be were going to do with the public, with their bodies, with their minds, and it wasn't a pretty sight. I just never thought it would get this to where we are now. But now I'm at the reason I'm even doing this, and I will say this on anybody that I talk to, is because we're at this fork in the road of free will, free speech, our right to our own autonomy of our bodies, all of these things, our constitution in this country, law, the impending subject of neuro law coming into the scene. And since discovering what was going on in the United States regarding this, and people will see this maybe soon or later. So this what I'm saying now may not be true 3 months from now or a year from now, but at this time, committees from countries are usually supported by that country, and they're financed and organized, and there's cooperation going on when there's new technology released with, like, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, about when stuff comes out. For this, there is a complete blockout of no cooperation, no free-flowing information, no financial support, nothing, because this particular work is the high game of all warfare, is the capture and control and the manipulation of emotion, internal dialogue, and kinesthetic response with post-hypnotic suggestion in an ongoing culture. And it's not getting the attention that it deserves, because a lot of people are scared to even deal with it. And most of the culture at present is more distracted than ever. And
by design, right?
By design, sure. And this particular fork in the road is it's the high ground of the decision of how we're going to mutate as a species, and under whose direction and why, and who's going to do it and who's not going to do it, and what it's going to do to ultimately how we interface with each other permanently. So that's what I'm involved with now. And I've already had a lot of high profile meetings with some military people, government people, scientists, physicists, and they're all semi terrified of the situation at hand, because of the fact that there hasn't been somebody in the public to represent you and everybody else that should have a say in this matter of how we move forward. Because I say this because I knew what the effects were going to be when the cell phones were rolled out. I could tell real early what it was going to do to social space, to communications in general, and how we deal with each other. And with this, you're going to see, most likely, you're already seeing it now in little dribbles, the biggest mental health crisis in history, because people are not going to know what's already happening and what's real and what's not. And with the amount of electrical interference and everything, we're at a point as a culture and a species where we've got to decide the difference between authority and power, and whose authority are we ultimately answering to. So these are the biggest conversations that are going on behind the scenes. But when people see these conversations, like Noah Harari speaking, it's a very controlled conversation. If I were in the conversation, it'd be quite different, because he's making declarations and not having conversations about what is going to be, and that should not be that way. So I've decided reluctantly to come out more in the public and kind of put my stake in the ground, and summon people from all over the world to engage this conversation. Because if we're just talking about the U.S., this is my country just as much as it's yours, even though they've lied to everybody about who its real owners are. We still have a stake in it. And since the United States is basically the civilization's most modern idea of what freedom should be because of our Constitution, this leads into a much, much bigger conversation that it has not really been had yet. And I'm doing this interview to put the brakes on everything having to do with this fusion and of the brain, computer, and so forth, and have a much bigger dialogue of what that's going to mean. Because I've talked to all sorts of different people about it, and the ones that do have the guts of me to talk about it see it in different perspectives. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong. What I am saying is those perspectives need to be out. The people that are controlling the post-information environment and all the information that everybody's seeing, that is totally lopsided and not true. And it needs to be much more balanced. And I think that that's the mission at hand, because this is, most people, they have not really studied what MKUltra really did. They've heard it all, and they've seen the movies, and they made a fortune off of what we told. And we never asked for anything. We just asked that they stop doing the methodology that they were doing, and lying to everybody about it, and then using it against the population. So that's why I decided that I wanted to come out and do this. And I'm very happy to do it here with you, actually, because of Howard, and because Howard being a mutual friend of ours from the past. I discussed this with him, and because I was trying to determine whether or not if I should have any part of any of that. If I should just, okay, I did my part, I'm leaving, I'm going to go over here, see ya. And what my role would be, participation, why, what the stakes would be with the dangers, all that stuff. I had that conversation with him. And now that I'm in one of his places here, I can feel it again, actually, that conversation taking place.
It's an honor have you share this story and connect with you and to hear this. It goes so deep. I could tell this morning in the last few hours, man, there's a lot for you to unpack. I'd love to hear more about your time with Walter, why his book was never read by many, how the CIA bought the books, why you can't find a lick of his interviews on the internet. I've just been censored myself for the people I've had on, Peter McCullough, Jack Cruz. They're censoring me and I'm a nobody. So I'm here to seek truth, to share it, to learn, to grow. But I'd love to hear some time with Walter, what you were learning and why his book was pretty much dismantled and what happened to him.
Well, I always told him that you made the biggest discovery and declaration, but it killed you, because the knowledge, carrying that type of knowledge around with you in a very small group of people, it had a tremendous weight on him. Because I was introduced to him when I was flown into Tucson here in Arizona, not here, but in Tucson, because I was asked to do an interview about a UFO case specifically. And because of that interview, it led me to, I was talking with Omni Penthouse magazine in New York, because I had been given photographs of aliens, and it was military pass along, and they said, take these, because they knew I knew Walter Bowart, and they knew I was talking to Omni magazine and Penthouse anyway. And then they said we take him over here, because at that point in time, Omni magazine was one of the top magazines published anywhere that was way ahead of everybody on everything. And they were one of the first magazines to even dare talk about what was going on at the UFO abduction area. Okay. Because I was there at the very beginning, before the internet, and it was very different. The culture was very different. How people talked about it was different. How they took notes about it was different. How they talked to other people about it was very different. And then his interest in me, when I was introduced to him, was how I got certain information about how the abductions were being faked. And it dovetailed with neuroscience that he knew, with hypnosis and other drug-induced trance states that were used for like memory overlay, creating a false memory or getting rid of one and inserting another one in. So I met him during that time, because before that I was heavily involved with Bud Hopkins, Wendell Stevens, Marianne Shenefield, Dr. Andrea Baharj, Bob Dean, Virgil Armstrong, Doris Van Tassel. I knew everybody that was going on, because we were watching very closely what was going on in the culture. And I was very interested in seeing what was going on, because I'd seen one of these things that everybody sees today in Europe, in England, actually. And it kind of propelled my life to get to that position, because I was curious and I knew something I'm not being told the truth that's going on.
How old were you then?
That was, I was in 10th grade.
Wow.
In England.
Wow.
And I saw that, and I didn't even know what I was looking at. And I had absolutely no interest, or my brain was not thinking UFO, nothing. I just didn't understand what I was looking at. And it was highly unusual, and it had all these different effects. And there was nobody to talk to at that time about it at all. There was nothing in the culture about any of that. So that, from Europe to moving into the US and then going to college, I carried all that with me. And right after, when I left college, I was propelled to look into that for my own reasons. And then I happened to meet all the key people regarding that. And then it was because of a very not so famous abduction case. It's not even really an abduction case, of somebody that went through sort of a brain augmentation. They were blinded, and then because of the blindness, the brain overcompensated and they could see color, frequency, mathematics, and language in space. And this person, her name was Marianne Shenefield. And because I interfaced with her for a very long time before I met Walter. And then she told me these cases are being faked and this is who's doing it and how they're doing it. I said, how do you do that? How do you know that? She said, because I can see it with my eyes. Because she had a different type of vision. And for the people that don't understand, I'll just say it for the record, the reason they were faking the abductions were obviously for political things to control narrative and so forth, but it was also to cover up the real ones. Because the real cases, these people would have been augmented and they had higher IQs, they were smarter, they changed, they were elevated. And in some cases, that was a national security issue because they had abilities that invaded privacy, so we say. So after learning all that, I get introduced to Walter Bowart, and then he said, this is the missing piece to all my findings. And then I got to get to know him as a very young person. And then eventually we started doing all the R&D for and follow-up findings for the second book, Operation Mind Control, the Special Researchers Edition. That's the one I was a part of. And everything at that time was kind of a template for the future because we had access. We're kind of behind the national security curtain. And Colonel Fletcher Prouty, for starters, I was talking to him and people couldn't believe it because I was a young guy, but I had access to this information and everybody was interested in hearing what I had to say about that. And that's how I landed in Walter's corner. I literally walked through the door and then within an hour, I knew I'd know him till he was dead in his last moment. And that was kind of how it went. So that developed and bloomed into a whole thing that was going on behind the scenes in terms of we had he very much wanted to go from writer of books to screenplays. And at that time, we spent a lot of time in Los Angeles, and we met with Oliver Stone because he was like, "Okay, let's do Operation Mind Control, the movie, and do this." And then he was trying to figure out how to do all that stuff, and that's a weird story, how that happened and what happened afterwards. But he, from what I learned from him. What has happened in the decisions that have been made in this country, he influenced because he essentially from the ground up started the alternative press in this country in New York with a newspaper called the East Village Other. And he told me all about it in length. And this was the time during the 60s when it was sex, drugs, rock and roll and all of this stuff. And I heard firsthand what was being done with LSD, why it was being done, how it was being distributed, how they almost killed him and they killed other people involved, and how the whole the cat was out of the bag in terms of sanctioned, unauthorized behavior modification on culture and how it was being done and by whom and for what purposes. And it ultimately was done to us, specifically Americans first, in a much more profound way to lead up to where we are today, which is the potential collapse of our republic, our constitution, and our own freedom to think and free will and so forth. So it's the end situation of MKUltra unleashed.
Let's go into what the development of the CIA and some of that trajectory of MKUltra, what you know about the construction of it and the details of some of the book that you came to know and where
the important parts. I would always tell everybody, read it for yourself, both volumes. But the birth of neuroscience, psychology, psychiatry, all of those things were born out of warfare. and sexual abuse. Both those elements, because of warfare and sexual abuse, were compiled together to control, extract, gain information during war. So initially, when Walter discovered this, it was from a Vietnam vet, because he lived next to a soldier, got drafted. He was one way, then he came back, and he was a totally different guy, and he had major amnesia, and his whole being changed. And that was the eye opener of what would be the kind of commercialized neuroscience that's diseased this country, because the pharmaceutical firms, the behavior like the DSM-5, mental health, all of that is like an experiment in the United States, and it's an offshoot of MKUltra and the CIA's participation with scientists like Sidney Gottlieb was one of them, Jose Delgado, the Princeton psychiatrist. Him and a hypnotherapist were highly influential in creating a vision of being able to create a psycho-civilized society based upon the utilization of the human body as a transmitter receiver from some other object. So they foresaw us being able to be kind of tuned like a piano, but from a distance, and how that could affect value systems. So there's many people involved. See, that people associate MKUltra with CIA. That's true, but there's other elements outside of that from other countries, including Great Britain, Tavistock, and so forth, that influenced the sanctioned legalization of it and allowing this, because the much of when people think of all the sexual abuse that's going on in this country, the science of that, what they got out of it and utilized, is being used against people. And that's when they associate, most people do, MKUltra with child abuse, and that was just a small part of it. They modeled, and this is an important thing people need to know, they modeled the trauma-based effects of these experiments, and they modeled that into what would be the national security state. So, for instance, I kind of explained it to you before. Part of the problem in the United States is compartmentalization. A doesn't know what B knows. B doesn't know what C knows. C doesn't even know A exists. B won't talk to C because they would threaten to be killed. So you have three people working on the same thing, but they don't know each other. And when there's pieces of information that's missing, and when they did the National Security Act in 1947, they cut off free flow of information, transparency, and it's like we were split in half. And behind the national security curtain, which is like Star Trek, that's really what it is, and then everybody else in Disneyland. The same model, the same type of effect happens when they'll say it in culture, because I hear it all the time, they splinter somebody's identity. They're splintering it, but the splinter is the brain's way of reorganizing and protecting itself, because your brain is always it's self-serving and protect you at all times. So in order to do so, it fractures and puts the bad event over here and keeps this other part of you over here. So, but they don't know each other exists.
And one feels good, distracted.
Yes, and the other one over here. And then sometimes the bad one will come up once in a while. And then that person goes out and gets drunk or whatever because they don't know why this is happening. So that was modeled after child abuse and the neuroscience behind that, the national security state, so that you have two entities involved, both not talking to each other fully. And these people have all the facts and what's going on, and these people don't. So what that does is creates chaos and misunderstanding between the military-industrial complex, I guess we can call it that, or in present day everybody else here in Disneyland. That's what they modeled it after that.
Yeah.
Because when we were looking at psychiatrists' files and cases, because we had to sign paperwork to not discuss their names or anything.
Right.
They're totally freaked out about doing that. They all thought they were going to get killed, and they're terrified of sharing what was going on with their clients. And you hear all over the country about child abuse, and now the MKUltra is like, people hear it all the time, but you never hear from the psychiatrists that have to deal with all the after effects of these people. They're not in interviews. You don't hear them spoken about at all.
Or what they've learned from the experiments.
Correct. That's kind of blacked out from public awareness. And
that it's still happening.
Yes.
And that it's compartmentalized. Even when you've sat in these meetings, you've realized that even the people, say, for the deeper state or these military-industrial complex, sorry, but basically they don't know what's going on.
Right.
Because they're all focused on one compartment.
Right.
Which is
exactly.
a big piece.
Yes. So here we are in today, present day, and we don't have a free flow of information and exact idea of what's really going on in culture. And that's what the National Security Act did, because we said in order to bring us whole as a country, that they'd have to repeal that and reframe it entirely. And now, because of what's going on now, that should be talked about every single day because of the fusion of the brain-computer interface and what the effects are going to be, which are basically an extinction level event in terms of how you and I and people out in the street converse and cooperate to make a society functional for everybody. They're going to unleash this. They're not. They've already started it, and
it's more like mass confusion. No one knows what's real.
Correct.
Fear, so then you have to trust an authoritarian.
Yes, yes, and it's all being done at the same time while they're having this sort of simulated extraterrestrial UFO disclosure, which is all they're doing is sculpting the future and sculpting an audience to prepare for new information that's going to come out so that they will receive it in the way it's been designed prior when they were sculpting. So they're not really disclosing anything, because if they're disclosing something, they would just bring out the aliens and say, here it is.
And when you say they now, people always want to know, so who is it?
They are the people that...
The World Economic Forum.
No. These are the people that are testifying before Congress that are working for defense contractors, that are part of the so-called Greer disclosure movement. And it's an attempt at a disclosure, but it's not really. It's cultural jamming and engineering to prepare us for the potential mental breakdown of culture.
Because people will be in fear and seek some form of intelligence or power to take care of them and trust the authority.
Yeah. And it's really being done to create authority figures in that field to babysit and be there when the big stuff comes out, which it will shortly. And so that when people realize that we've been in touch with higher intelligence or alternate intelligence, that the humans and the receivers of that go to their human authority figures for help rather than a higher intelligent being. It's the final act of kind to control a culture. We knew this in the 2000s, actually, when we were talking to Bud Hopkins about how ultimately the world will hear about this unfolding activity that's been going on all over the world, and how they would mentally be able to handle it. So, and it's all tied in to the brain-computer interface also. People probably won't like me saying that because it's they want to keep that out of it, but it has to be said because our intelligence services, our military, our banking people that are currently deciding what they're going to do with us in terms of how they straighten out our currencies and all this. All of this is related to it. So,
how far back does this go? Because you were talking about the Bilderbergs and the Rockefellers, and you're talking about the central banks and the changing of language. And can we get into some of that? And also Marshall McLuhan.
yeah. So when I was working with Walter, we did tremendous amounts of research and so forth. He was very playful with me, and he would be screaming and yelling at me, "You need to read this, and you need to understand this, and you need to learn this, and da da da." And what about this? And what do you think about this? So we'd have tons of dialogue, and he'd always.
How many years were you with him? Decade?
A little longer than a decade.
So you're just downloading.
As much as possible. He would always say, remember, technology dictates modality. And I'm like, okay, great. Will you explain what that means? And he would just keep repeating it without explaining it. And eventually I got what he meant. And it basically, he was trying to give me the preliminary understanding that every time there is a creation, a technological creation, it could be a cup, a fork, a knife, a gun, there is, it changes the sensory balance of the brain and the senses. So they don't operate the same. The effect of listening to music with your eyes open is different than the effect of listening to music with your eyes closed. And knowing in between how when one sensor is closed and one is open, one enhances and the other goes down. Like I did tons of experimentation with him with sensory deprivation, sanctioned. I agreed to do it, and because I wanted to understand what happens when you shut off the eyes and you just listen.
Yeah.
And then you shut off the nose and then doing total blackouts, and then for periods of time to see what happened to my senses, because he wanted to get me to understand the relationship between perception and how your senses are balanced. And Marshall McLuhan basically he introduced that work to me, and we came to find and discovered that the Bilderberg Group and others militarized his work and utilized what he discovered.
Unknowingly, Marshall did not want this.
I don't think he did, because I did speak to Eric about it, Eric McLuhan, and I told Andrew McLuhan about it, and because it sank in as the truth that the medium is the message, because when I first started to rant and rave and see a real change in culture is when the digital pagers first came out. I saw a major change in behavior on how people deal with each other, how they communicate, how it altered social space, how it creates states of anticipation, how it gave people anxiety, how it angered people. I was very interested in how people reacted around technology. And that is essentially the what his message or understanding is that for every time there's a technological change, there's a tremendous change in human perception and value system. And in order for culture to survive, there'd have to be dialogue about the effects of technology before it's released rather than after. So as a result of all of that, I've always wanted to talk about the culture before it comes out rather than what happens when it's out already and it's doing damage or whatever it's doing before. Because Marshall McLuhan, his work, you never hear it associated with mind controller MKUltra. They have not made the connection yet after this entire time, because I've listened to hundreds of people for years talk about it, and they all think it's all some electronics. You just put something outside the door and aim it, and then you can make somebody wind up like a robot. Yes, you can do that, but that's not entirely it at all. It's the alteration of language. It's the sculpting of perception. It's the introduction to how you respond to new technologies and if they affect or speed up or slow down the central nervous system. Because when the cell phones came out, they completely augmented and changed the central nervous system entirely. There was a massive behavioral change, a cultural change, but nobody was told at City Hall that these were going to put on sale, and nobody said anything. They just did it, and this is the problem that we're having today. And I'm not the first to say this, because there's groups set up now and saying that we need to be more responsible how we put out technologies and so forth, but it hasn't stopped anything. It just is dialogue, but it doesn't change policy. It doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So McLuhan, I feel and can see how his work was weaponized. It's in Understanding Media is a very difficult book for people to read, because he played on language. He didn't write the book typically the which we were trained to read the book, and he knew the effects of the language in prose and the way he wrote. And so it's supposed to be read like poetry. It's not supposed to be read like, a book report or something like that. So it takes a long time to absorb and understand. But the main message of it and the main point of it is that every time there's some technological change, there's a change in us. So man shapes his tools, and then his tools shape himself.
Wow.
And this is what they're doing.
Right.
This is what they're really doing behind the scenes. With all this tech explosion and everything, there's absolutely zero responsibility at all with any of this. All of it. Because you'll hear on podcasts and news and this, 5G is horrible, 6G is horrible, and it is horrible. But in order to actually slow things down, there needs to be an understanding of what these technologies do before you put them out.
Which is the major problem with exponential technological progress with AI.
Yes. Yeah, because AI is...
everybody's got that tragedy of commons where if I don't do it, China's going to do it.
Correct.
Or this company's going to do it. So we might as well do it now and get it out there.
Yes, because if you're
it's a race.
Viewing your reality through a military lens, you won't want to be behind what somebody else is doing that can kill you. You either want to be able to counter it or do it yourself or do it better. And I think that's
what are the problems you see in these meetings? You've said some people are just so short-term thinking, self-interest, looking for their own status.
Well, I can say precisely what's going on in your U.S. culture regarding this is that, and it's not just this administration or the previous administration, it's been that way for a long time, is that people that are making decisions for our culture that we put into office, they're elected employees, and this is no surprise to anybody, they're totally self-serving. They're very unaware of what's going on. I can't believe how many times I've had to tell a congressperson or tell a judge or tell a scientist, this is what's going on, and they can't believe it. They've never heard of it before. So that shouldn't be happening. Our leaders are absolutely, totally uninformed. I've seen, because I've met quite a few of them, and they all thank me afterwards. And I'm like, well, you're the congressperson, you're the scientist, you're on the board at MIT, you're there, and you don't know this at all?
Right.
I mean, that's what we're dealing with. I don't think the public really understands how bad the information gap is and that
It's the compartmentalization again, too.
yes, because most anybody can be bought and paid for, but some of that a bad habit is in other countries more than here, and I see a lot of people that they're in elected positions, and the most important thing out of the job is visibility, relevance, social relevance on the digital landscape. Their digital node is their self-esteem, the how much attention they're getting. That one of the worst effects of the internet and social media, that they call it, is the attention economy that it is created, because it overrides everything.
Yep.
Everything.
Right.
Because I know highly relevant, socially important news, not just for myself and other people, that they don't get to the public because of these problems with this kind of narcissistic, sociopathic, lunatic people that are producing and trying to be relevant in the digital landscape, which it's like media validation is the new disease. And this is an effect that I saw a long time ago.
Engineered too.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So when somebody loses their page that had 50,000 followers or whatever, I've heard just people have complete, utter, total breakdowns.
Right. I had a page removed yesterday from TikTok for Reels censorship, and I could care less.
Yeah,
It's not about me. It's about getting these messages to the masses.
Yeah,
so it's more dangerous than anything. But.
The need for attention is way more valued than the need to fix the issue. And I always use the example of,
and that's MKUltra.
Like
2.9.
It's more important that you and I get our picture taken in front of this burning house with all these people dying inside, and get the picture and get it on first and have that there, than to actually go in and get them.
Yeah, you see that where a man will hit a woman in a public place and they're filming it.
No
one's doing anything.
Yeah. This is like appalling to me to see this over and over and over again. And we're not self-correcting. We're not calling it out. And in fact, we're propping them up.
What are some of the ways you see being a solution? Which is why you're on these boards, I know, but
yeah, that specifically is to
unplug,
completely do a media fast, and I mean a full one. That means no technology, no books, no phones, no computers, no nothing, on your own in nature for an extended period of time, so you can remember what your heartbeat feels like, you breathe different, and you get away from all of that, because it's affecting our value system, our own individual spiritual growth, our relationship to ourselves, our relationships. I've seen so much collateral damage, and where key decisions are being made, and they'll be delayed because they can't get on this platform that has 1 million people watching.
Right.
Stuff like that. It drives me totally crazy seeing that, because I've seen one of the effects, as I see commentary on commentary, people who have broadcasts where they're doing commentary on what somebody else says, and they're doing commentary on commentary, and they're just talking about what somebody else says, and then they talk about what they say, and they talk about what they say, and for nothing.
Yeah.
Just to get.
It's just like fast food.
Yes. It's completely insane. It's totally insane.
But it's engineered again. Like once you get into the roots and nuts and bolts, when I read Operation Mind Control and the Manchurian Candidate, and you start learning about this and you go, oh, this is actually by design, which is the creepiest part.
Yes, you can put people into the public space, and you can be sitting right next to somebody and they'll seem perfectly healthy, functional, balanced, relaxed, and that's not actually them at all. It's a stressor has been put in place, like a Band-Aid, where you have a front gate person, and behind it is a highly damaged, malfunctioning, broken person. But you have a layer on top which is protecting and managing the situation. So you can have somebody totally slick, like somebody that's very out in the open, that's incredibly damaged. You can just see it is President Macron of France.
Yeah.
Um,
Or Barack Obama.
yeah, he's the textbook Rolls Royce version of Manchurian candidate. People criticize him and da da da.
Or Hillary
Yes,
Clinton.
yeah, you can see that. And
I guess any politician at some level, when you seek to gain that much power and you get there and then you're compromised, and it usually came from being groomed to that position.
yes, and I know people still today that knew him as a teenager and what happened to him, and who he pair bonded with as a child, and what happened to him, and how he got into how his values were formed and all these other things. And then he ends up going from Barry Soetoro to Barack Obama. But he didn't change his name. He completely changed the value system through it can be through neurolinguistics, it can be through hypnosis, it can be through drugs and things. It can also be from electrical impulses that are periodically put to the brain that's changed the personality.
Psychedelics.
Anything.
Yeah.
Many of those things to sculpt the person that you want to put out there. And Barry probably he's by far the most visible one and the most famous one of all time. I feel bad for that because I see him and I can see who he really is. And he's the guy that does the narration for the Netflix movie.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be in show business. That's what he's supposed to be doing. He's a great narrator and a great host, but he has no values because he'll sell out anybody to get where he is, to protect himself, because he's tortured because he can't be himself.
And this happened to all of these actresses, musicians, LA culture,
Yes.
MKUltra.
Yeah, it's a lot of that. Like I have countless people come up to me and say, "Oh, this person has been this and they've been this, and da, 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 da. Can you help them?"
And they don't even know it's happened to them. Why would they ever?
Right. And they all expect that I press a button and then they're going to be fixed. And that's not how it works at all, because it takes a while to identify and find out what's really going on. Because some of these people have had like deep post-hypnotic blocks inserted in there. They're tied into certain muscle groups. Their sleep cycles are completely, totally different. They have different voices. They're real people. Some people are controlled by tonality, some are controlled by language, some are more controlled by drugs. And like with Barry, for instance, you can't get to the real guy in a normal state, because you're not going to find him here. You have to get to him in an alternative state. Like he's the perfect guy to smoke joints with, because that's what he likes to do. But if you do that with him, you will find the real guy there. If you can get past the gates that have been set up to protect what he's hiding.
That's what Jolly West, for the CIA, lead psychiatrist for a while, with Manson, with Oswald, and all these guys, right? Manipulation.
Yes. When the psychiatrists and psychologists that supposedly work in the mental health industry in this country are the eyes and ears of the whole thing, but you never hear anything about it because it's like attorney-client privilege. They're not going to be talking about their clients. And if they do, they're going to change their names or whatever, but they see all the collateral damage of this, because this has been going on here since the 40s, and you've got a whole legion of this abuse that's happened.
Right.
And I've said it before and I'll say it again, the abused tend to repeat it on you.
And they're institutionalized through their education, or doctors or psychiatrists, from that model of centralization.
Yes.
So they think they're doing their work through their lens.
Yes, exactly. So you have this undergoing problem in the mental health status of Americans, because when you're not here in the U.S. and you go to a foreign country and you spend a lot of time there, and then you come over here, after being over there, and you look with kind of a fresh lens for a couple of days, see how things are, you can clearly see Americans are totally wired differently than any other place. Half of these people here are on prescription meds. There's major cognitive degrades happening because of the kill shots. There's a oversaturation of information, so people are like burned out totally.
The light,
yeah,
blue light, indoors all day.
yes,
disconnected from nature.
yes. They've got a lot of age groups don't even know how to talk to anybody.
The food.
Yes,
you
the
can go
food.
on and on
All
and
of it.
on.
All of it. All of that in your biological instrument, when it interfaces with electronics and all these other stimulus, can alter mood, can create fake schizophrenia. They've got everything to do everything that they want. And now they're really the reason why I do this, and I say it again, is because we're at this point where when they fuse this together, as they've already done in China. They're ahead of us. They've experimented on children. They've utilized it on the public there right now, and they're getting ready to come and do a soft takeover of everything. People won't even know that it's happened because they're going to invite everybody in to do this. Just everybody remember the image when, the new cell phones come out and people are standing outside like they're about ready to meet some movie star, and all they're going to do is get a new phone, but they're standing in line for it.
So what is the trajectory here and who are the people that are running this? Is it the Klaus Schwabs and these folks?
They're the ones with all the money that are doing the endorsing it, pushing it, and ultimately they see what's happened in the last week with Palantir and all the AI is they're coming out and saying, AI is way further along than we're talking about. All of it's getting set up to undermine.
And that bill that just passed to allow AI to basically influence and not be held accountable.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Which means it's a free for all for everybody, which means there's no law and order. You can't conduct any courts anymore. It will obsolesce the courts. It will change law. It will change everything. And there's a very interesting thing that's happening right now, and I'm seeing there's little law firms that are opening up, specializing in neuro law, and they're claiming that they're the first and and they're preparing in advance
to capitalize.
Yes. Meanwhile, there's like absolutely zero.
Just guinea pigs.
Yeah, that there is no precedence for this in law.
Right.
And the key and the part that I'm gonna I'll bring out to the public at the appropriate time is going to be the how consciousness is going to be legislated and by whom, and how does that even work in our current legal system. And you being a sovereign being, what is that going to mean for you as you go along in life? Do you have to make a declaration of your cognitive rights when you go get new identification? Because this is all happening now. Because the reason I emphasize this is when I was out of the country and I came into the country for the first time ever after traveling, they said Americans go that line, Europeans go that line. So I go to the Americans line, and I said, "There's no line. Where'd everybody go?" Well, there wasn't any people on the booths.
Sure.
They just said, "Go look in that camera, put your face up to it,"
I had that,
and then you just leave. And I know what that is. I know what it's going to be used for, and I know what they're getting ready to do. And I said, "Okay, that's it. It's time that the public deserves to know what this is leading up to. The biometrics, all of this stuff is going to have a completely, totally different position in law, and I'm going to initiate something with the courts and with the United States having to do with the protection of your right to have your own thoughts, your own brain, your own genetics that are yours." It doesn't mean like there's this mutation that's about to happen. It's also screwing with your genetics, not just your brain. While they bring in all the robots, while they start to depopulate or attempt to do all this stuff. And
Which
there's
is like COVID and the jab.
yes,
mRNA technology.
yes, all of it is going to be done in tangent, and with the potentially forced engineering of getting into your body, getting that shot in there to sterilize you, whatever, to depopulate. So they're using behavioral science and using AI and other things to bring it all to a close, to end it all, so that you'll just submit, and then you'll quietly get out of the way, because you won't live to 80, you'll live like to 40 or whatever. And this is I'm going to hold a lot of people accountable in the very near future with dealing with this and talk about it in the public and being authentic and not lying to the public about it, because enough is enough. I think everybody in this country and beyond, and I say this for Americans, because we're supposed to set the standard for freedom all over the world. We were once loved for it because we had the most of it, and now we've used it against everybody. And now this Constitution needs to be updated, and there needs to be another amendment that comes in, another bill that's passed that protects people, so that when it comes time to deal with this division that's going to take place, where people will fuse with the computers, because this has already happened, because I've talked to somebody that is fused, and I didn't get to talk to him enough because I wanted to really learn about who he was before, who he is now, what's his pathology like, is he sleep more, does he sleep less, does he have voices going on? I mean, we should know that stuff. And I didn't get a chance to, because he was working on something in Europe. It was super secret, and he said what happened and how they got him into that position, because he was writing code looking at a screen and writing the code as it's happening, and kind of bragging about it. And these were strong indicators that if that's happening with him, it's happening way beyond that. And we just have not been privy to any of that stuff. And so I think we have a gigantic, massive decision to be made as a species. And people like Noah Harari or whatever should not be allowed to speak on his own in front of 10,000 people without being
countered.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like an authoritarian message.
Absolutely. I am for way more dialogue.
It's like Fauci.
Yes.
You give these people like the authority.
Yeah, I am.
And people worship it as the truth.
I am the messenger. I'm not the authority, and I'm telling people that see this and hear this, because they will in high places, that this dialogue needs to begin right now, because they're just steamrolling over everything, and people are just, we're just starting the AI, and everybody says it's going to destroy us. Okay, so let's do it quicker and faster. That's what is like totally insane to me, that we've reached this time where we don't have any value on human life anymore.
Well, and the MKUltra byproduct of distraction and soma and what's gone on for 60, 70 years is weapons of mass distraction.
Yes.
People are asleep and numb, and they want to get their vape pen and TikTok, and they don't want to pay attention to it. And then there's like a hopelessness and a disconnect from any meaning, from what you would call spirit, spiritual meaning. And so I think people are just more and more, there's been a psychological warfare that's been so sophisticated and deployed that we would expect this.
Yes.
Shouldn't be a surprise anymore once we investigate it. Now it's time to go, okay, what do we do?
Yeah, and that's really what it's going to come down to, because certain people in certain key positions that are supposed to be the people in charge of protecting us, shall we say, that they if they can't do it, then get out of the way and let somebody else that can do it. Because a lot of people I have met that are in positions, I can't believe they're in those positions.
And who's listening that seems to care? Like you talked to Bobby Kennedy.
I talked to Bobby about it, and privately over the phone before I was interviewed by him. And he's one of the few people in the world that understand the high ground, where this is going, and what the potential effects are going to be. He's one I know, maybe.
But he's compromised. because he's
Yeah,
so deeply.
I think people have made it very difficult for me to talk to him in private. Very difficult. In fact, I was in his sites 5 or 6 times, and it was stopped because I would much rather talk to people in private before I have to go talk to people in public. Because if it's done in privately, there could be a lot less conflict, and it could be a peaceful negotiation without having to do the ranting and raving in public to get this issue discussed. Because this is the I talked to a physicist about it, a very well-known physicist about it, and he says, "Well, we're in the singularity now. This is part of it." And I had another guy tell me yesterday, he goes, "Because of what you're doing, you're going to have AI stalkers now." And I went, "What? AI stalkers?" And I had to think about that, what that means, and that's already happened.
Like algorithmically,
yeah,
controlling your patterns.
Yeah, I was in Europe and got an actual phone call from Musk. His voice, totally fake, having a conversation. And then I started getting messages and texting from him.
Mm.
And then I said, I was going back and forth. Well, I said, you can quit the faking now and da-da-da-da-da. I know it's not you. And then they called. And it was him. And it was a picture of him talking, and he turns his head once.
Shit.
Yeah, and then there's a bunch of people there. He was calling from a meeting because he wanted to prove that it was him, but it wasn't him, and I know it wasn't him.
How'd you know?
Because
you know that you wouldn't get a phone call from him.
No, it's within reach, but he wouldn't do it like that. He wouldn't do it like that at all. He would know better than to do it like that. And then I've seen the voice cloning and all this stuff, the effects that are happening to people and how they're responding to it.
And people are being, robbed for thousands of dollars because they'll have the kid call a fake kid with their voice to say they're endangered and you need to, it's insane.
Yeah, and this is gonna
get worse.
It will put a lot of innocent people in jail, in prison. So,
because they can fake and send your DNA and fake crimes and ruin reputations,
absolutely,
discredit you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where we're at, and so
then you're just in fear and you're in authoritarian control.
Exactly, and that's where we're at, and it needs to be
like
taken.
North Korea, but on steroids.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of steroids, like a tremendous amount of steroids.
But just that same idea of fear, and you can't question or have a conversation with or rebel.
Correct. Exactly. So we're backed into a corner, and we have to make a move now. Otherwise, it'll be too late, because all of this power and research, development, computational power, all that other stuff, the major might of it is being run by China. And it was arranged that way by the United States.
How long ago?
Many, many years ago, because the
50,
plan was,
60.
yeah. During the Kissinger-Haig era, it was designed that we're going to have this world government. It was going to be this small consortium of people made up this, and they were all going to agree to come together, unelected, and decide that we're going to take over and restructure how we deal with each other in a one world government, because the world's dying and we're killing it. And that was the front excuse of what they were going to do. So China had their place in it, and America had their place, and England and everybody else, and Sweden and whatever. They all had their place. And then as we get closer to structuring this whole thing, China decides, oh, well, we're not going to do that deal. We're going to do our own deal, which is basically what's happened behind the scenes. If they've decided they're going to take Africa, and they're going to be ones running the silent war to undermine you and take control over your mind through electronics, through satellites, through all the waves that interfere with your house, and then have that work in combination with the food, with the water, because you like a piano tuning a piano. You change a couple things and it changes all the notes.
Sure.
And this is basically what they're doing.
Changing vibration and frequency
Yes.
and tuning.
Yeah,
And then it's
exactly.
easier to program, which is what smartphone technology, blue lit screens have already become at the
That's
most.
it. Exactly. So that we're at this moment in history, probably the most important one ever, of what do we want next? What are we doing here, doing this? And why are we listening to these people that are unelected rich people that have stolen all this money because they created it out of thin air, stole the world, used the technology against the public to get us into this corner and to decide what they're going to do?
Yeah, I'd love to hear about Africa and go a little deeper on what's going on there right now, but I'm going to take a pee break and get some more coffee and we'll get right back.
Okay.
I can't talk. I've lost my voice on a day where I'm doing a podcast, which is incredible. But yeah, let's talk about what you do know about what's going on in Africa and what's not being shown to the public.
Okay, so because of a lot of work I've done in the background, I get a lot of science people, inventors or whatever, come to me with tech that is either highly disruptive or they think morally it should come out in the public and they don't want it all bought up by the big defense contractor companies or whatever. So they want to release it to better the world, to fix problems. So I meet with some engineers in Colorado that were referred to me by a military vet guy. I go meet them, and they essentially have a form of geothermic mapping that allows you to see way down in the ground, about 2 miles down, with extreme detail. And it would allow you to locate water, oil, precious metals, whatever you want. And I meet with them and I say, okay, is this exclusive to you? Why didn't you patent it? Blah, 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 blah. We get into all of that. And then they ask me, so do you think you could commercialize this and do something with this? And I said, let me think about that. And then about 2 minutes later, I said, I think this technology should go to the Congo. So I had a contact, a friend of mine that had been in and out of Congo for years and had relationships existing there already, that he'd had previously been inside Congo and had people that he knew in place, in all from tribal people to government people to banking people and so forth. So I asked him, I said, so what do you think about bringing this tech in? And he said, this is absolutely what we should do, and we should bring it in there. And so arrangements were made to fly. We were invited by the president there to come in and show this tech, meet the inventor, meet with the staff, and discuss what do you think you could do with this, because they have it's a failed state. It's a complete, total disaster area. You've got a culture that's been damaged and interfered with by multiple countries, including the United States. We're not innocent at all. And I said to President Tikashetty's advisor, who I got to know very well, you can clean up your entire situation here by using this tool and doing this, this, and this, but it's a tool only. And they took all of that under advisement. I was allowed to go into the central bank there because initially we were going to do something with the central bank to allow the utilization of this tool to be used in that area. And then on the last day, I had dinner with a colleague of mine and the president's advisor guy, who happened to be a pastor as well. And I told him my story, kind of like I'm telling you, and he decided to open up and tell him his story. And then
How long ago was this?
This was about 6 months ago, because I was there just before Christmas last year. And he went and told me that there was child abuse going on in the U.S. Embassy. that there are multiple people involved. His head went down and he started weeping in shame, and that I immediately was embarrassed because I was there representing not on official government capacity, but I was an American, and I'm having to hear this about that's going on. I never felt so repulsed and embarrassed and apologetic to this guy about what happened and what he told me in detail about. And this immediately changed everything in my mind and soul about what I was doing there. Because the technology to me at that point, that didn't mean anything anymore. And I already knew that the region and all the logistics which allow all the minerals to get in and out of there are the key to certain countries with these plans on what they're going to do to the future in the world. Africa is the key place in the world.
For all the silicon or
all the elements there.
Elements.
And the countries, most of the countries there have been interfered by other countries because it's the last vestige. It's not really industrialized to the point people are used to.
And we've been experimenting on them with Bill Gates.
Yes, they know that. They're very aware of that. So this man was desperate and embarrassed and said, well, can you give me the name of this guy? And he did. And they said, I'm going to need some evidence. I'm going to take this to do this. And this is going to be dealt with. This is before Trump was in, right? So I took that under advisement. I stayed in touch with him. And then just into the new year after Trump was elected, people don't realize, because they don't really see it, that when you go into the Congo, it's a very tense place, but there's a lot of Chinese there and there's a lot of construction there. And the Chinese that are there, they, that culture, have used their weakness to come in and take everything and control everything, or try to, because there's no contract law with that culture. And there's no, you have two kind of spiritually unevolved cultures that are using each other and clashing, because the Congolese culture is there's very little value on life. So life is cheap. And if you ask them, if I give you $500 today, would you like $500 today or $10,000 on Friday? Most people will take the $10,000 on Friday, but they won't. They'll take the moment. They take the moment because they could be dead tomorrow. So you have that psychology that's deeply rooted in all of that. And then, and then you have some people that I've met with that desperately and are sincere, want to change and self-sustain and actually create a country that's strong and has a foundation and everything. They're there too. But they have all this disruption going on. So I'm back in the US, and then I get a phone call from this guy, and he says, can you help us? This guy's a church member and has his own congregation. And he said, they're slaughtering everybody here. I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, haven't you heard? And he said, and I found out eventually the story about all these Christians being destroyed there, slaughtered, not just shot. It's worse than that. It's way worse than that. It's beyond barbaric what's happening. It's worse. The worst I've ever heard, actually.
What's driving it?
It's being funded by China, by militia groups to come in and move into the land, because it's all about the mineral rights and getting logistics and everything set up for foreign companies to come in and essentially dominate the entire region and take over.
So do they implant an ideology of warfare for the tribes to go after the Christians with a false pretext?
Worse.
Okay, tell me.
Worse. That's true, but they layer it in so it makes sure it's cemented for generations by the way they kill those people. And I prefer to be really honest and say what they're doing, because people need to know. It's just the ugly truth, but it's the truth. When you have to slaughter a bunch of people in a church in front of their children, I think at that point we're a failed species, because that should not be occurring in 2025 anywhere with anybody, period.
And what is it incentivized by large amounts of money? Or what?
It's incentivized by tribal warfare and large amounts of money and countries with a lot of excess cash that can buy and do all this behind the scenes, and they can come in and start setting up shop to create their own logistics and their own transportation of minerals that go in and out. So what they do to the existing culture there is they traumatize them generationally. So the children that saw that, they're screwed for life. There's no therapy. There's no nothing for these people out there.
Which
nothing.
is what happened in the Middle East.
Yes.
Right, when we've been over there.
Yes. So they do it, and they make everybody else experience it. So you have that trauma. Those children grow up without parents. Maybe they might make it till their 20s. They maybe life doesn't go very long there, and they're using brutal, absolutely brutal damage to the culture, and it's being financed by outside forces to come in and control, because it's all about the minerals, and it's all having control, because the powers that be, they want to create this world government, they want to have complete total control, but it requires chips, gold, certain materials for space and this and that, and it's all central there, most of it in large amounts. So all their phones and computers and all that other stuff, certain elements are only in certain places, and China wants to control all of that. And they don't care if they destroy everything there. So I get a call. What can you do? Can you help us? And I said, let me try. And introductions were made. And it was right around that time that because of the crisis they're in, President Tikasheti, and nobody does this, it's the first time it ever happened in history, where a president comes out in front of everybody and said, okay, you can have all our natural resources in exchange for regional stability so we survive. That means we can't make it. So that led to what you've seen in the last couple weeks ago with the South African president coming in, and then the Congressman Ronnie Jackson went over to there and talked with Tikasheti, and then Boulos, the African Affairs for Congo, went over there. That's one a relationship to Trump. They went over there and they did this deal for probably the biggest trade deal of all time. That's absolutely worthless, and in my opinion, won't go anywhere because there's too much damage in all the existing areas surrounding it. It's not stopping. It's happening on a daily basis. So
it's ideologically driven now. That too.
And what's being done is, and I think it's something this big that's being organized as I'm talking to you, because I'll have messages about it, is that because of the slaughter of all the Christians and other religions there, I'm sure, the churches are creating a massive peace envoy that's going to go into the region and stabilize it. And I've called State Department about it, and I'm creating dialogue right now because this is going to be done with non-government interference. It's going to be done by the faith-orientated people and non-government, entirely away from all that. And they're going to come in and attempt to bring in the peace process, because this is what's happening in South Africa with all the white people being killed. See, that whole continent is in chaos, and it's been made that way over a long period of time. And now we're moving into a different era where certain powers want complete control over that. So the trade agreement that's going on right now, that because President Tikasheti is coming in to the U.S., still scheduled to be here on the 15th, they're expecting some gigantic agreement that will stabilize everything there, but it's not really true because of the fact that the logistics and the whole area, it's all wrong because everybody focus is in the wrong area, because we should not be talking any business at all. That none of that matters. None of it.
Yeah.
Not one thing. What does matter?
Genocide.
Yes, that's what matters. Life matters. These are brothers and sisters. These are they have historical lineage to their land for generations, and we're allowing probably the biggest genocide, long-term one ever. And there's attempts in organizations right now behind the scenes that are organizing themselves to go in and have discussions about that. So a faith-based peace envoys being assembled to attempt to stabilize the region because we're supposed to.
Who organizes something like that? And what does it look like?
There's, I flew in to Mar-a-Lago, Florida and I don't want to mention their names yet, but because I don't have permission, but I met some pretty influential people with the church because they had a big event at Mar-a-Lago, Catholics for Catholics, and General Flynn was there, and his sister was there, and all these dignitaries were there, and that's where discussions were formulated there on what to do, because if the public saw, and they may see, because I was offered, oh, do you want to see all the photographic evidence of all this stuff? And I'm like, no, not yet. Thank you. Just hold on to that. I didn't want to see. I can have a good imagination and know what's going on. Once the world sees what's going on, I think it's going to have tremendous effects for really questioning who we are as a human species. Because you've got, on one thing, you've got the ending humanity, fusing them with the computer and quantum and AI. And then you have a complete, total, whatever Adolf Hitler did in World War II, it's nothing compared to what they're doing in Africa.
So they're eating bodies.
Yeah, there's cannibalism. There's the worst abuse I've ever heard, ever. And this is going on a daily basis, and it's not being, it's not getting any attention at all because of the owners of our news don't want you to pay attention to that. So this is all going on behind the scenes. And then yesterday, I had conversations with some of the current administration's advisors to certain sections of people about what's going on in South Africa too, and the importance of the trade deal. It wasn't so much about having a trade deal with Congo. It was about the ending the violence and ending the Chinese aggression over there. Because it's one thing if I come into your house and I want to do business with you, you make an agreement with me called a contract. I do what I say, you do what you say, and at the end we're supposed to be both better. Well, that's not what's going on over there at all. And a lot of people know that. They don't, the Congolese, when I was talking to them, they seemed surprised. They said they don't follow any of the rules. They violate this, they do this. And they look at me like they can't believe it. And I said,
They trust.
Yeah, there's a completely different mentality over there. There's good and bad, but they're very, I found them, the dignitaries I met, the locals, very friendly, kind people, and they can't believe that that would happen to them. Because when I was in the hotel in Kinshasa, there's just like it's a 5-star luxury hotel, but if you drive about less than a mile down the street, it looks like a complete demilitarized zone in a different country. You wouldn't even believe the distinctness between the two. So you've got a lot of development there and buildings, construction going on, but it's they don't have any money. They can't even feed themselves.
Right.
So it's a failed state. So it's important because if people get in there and they take over, they're going to have tactical advantage over other countries and dominance and controlling gold markets and all this other stuff. So it has to be dealt with now, but it's got to be dealt with from a more humane motivation first before any business, because everybody's just focused on the trade deal, but it's worthless right now. It won't even exist. And so there's now refocusing on doing something possibly with South Africa, because I spoke to people there and they would rather utilize and stabilize the region and do trade through South Africa than Congo, because it's just too violent, because the amount of cost and military that would have to be brought in to stabilize the area. Because at this point, you've got the gang of mercenaries that have been paid to do this. Nobody's coming after them. They're free walking around, and they do it every day probably. There's no justice over there at all yet. And I've already been in conversations about how that justice will be administrated.
Right.
It will end, but how it will end, it will be up to them. But it will end. So I was there for that, and then the ambassador is here in the U.S. right now, who I spoke to, because originally I was going to get these people in front of the media to show the world, because South Africa was just here. The president was just here, and Tekashetti's coming here on the 15th. I was going to put these guys in the press, introduce them to the world, and let the world see what this trade agreement is really about and who we are as a human family to allow this stuff going on in 2025. It's beyond people's imagination, really. They don't want to see it. So this is by the time people see this, whether they see it 6 months from now or whatever, the importance of what's going on in Africa, it's directly related to the technological acceleration of AI, the server, cooling the servers, all this technology that we're utilizing to create this world that they want. They need Africa. Other countries are stepping back, but Africa, if whoever gets total control over that and fight over it.
And this is the methodology that they've used, is to create, just using the people that live there to kill the others and capture them.
Because they've always been tribal.
Yeah.
And they've always been at war with each other. And
you start to pay them and infiltrate their
minds. Yes. That's right. And that's what's being done, because they're thrown cash and empty promises, and they don't even benefit hardly from all the excavation. They hire locals, but they don't pay them as well, and they don't pay them fairly, and they have ludicrous hours and child labor there as well. I mean,
cobalt mines. And
all should be the richest country in the world, but they have slave labor there. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Maybe we could also talk about what's going on in Israel and with the Mossad, and some of your views on what that is and how much that plays a role in this situation.
I'll say it like this, because if I say it how I want to say it, I know what people will do. And I'll just say
it. Well, without going blanket statement that there's these big groups.
Yeah.
Let's get nitty gritty with more of the idea.
I would say it like this. Black, white, red, yellow, brown, all of these genders and races of people, they've all screwed up each other and themselves in horrible acts of violence over centuries. So I don't give anybody a free pass, period. That includes Israel and what's happened there. Because I learned the very hard way when I first came into the U.S. about Israel and the Jewish people and the Jewish religion and how all that plays out. I grew up in Europe, and I didn't run into it at all, really, until I came into the U.S. And then I started to learn about it through experience and hearing about it. Now today, anybody that scrolls on any social media, you're going to see just massive disgust of what has happened in Gaza, and why, as a civilization in 2025, are we having that type of activity and nobody does anything? Not one country. Not one. You've got them literally crying out to the world, and the killing continues. So it says a lot about us as a species, who is doing it, who's responsible. Um,
The narrative control,
yes,
like
that.
the ability to just question or have
Yeah,
conversation.
like the first people really that did legislating consciousness was a bill that would essentially say, uh, you can criticize everybody else, that's fine, but you're not allowed to criticize the Jews. No, you guys don't get a free pass. I'm sorry.
And then people get blanketed or lumped into, what does that mean?
Yes.
Because most people are awesome. It's not
Yeah.
about the Jews. It's more about the underlying principles that are driving it, the ideology maybe behind it.
Yeah.
That you can't question.
Yeah. And there's
if you said American or Christian, 99.9% of them I work with, and it's great.
Right.
So it sucks to do this with group identity, but that's the problem that we all get hooked in.
Yep.
And the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater.
Yep. And there's a lot of Jews that you don't see or don't hear from that they aren't in agreement with any of that.
Right.
They don't want any of that, but you don't see that very much. I've talked with people that are disgusted by Netanyahu, disgusted about what's happening over there, but you don't see them, and you don't see them highlighted ever. What you do see is a lot of dissent and anger on how they view other people and how they perceive something that's non-Jewish.
Right. Well, then you have Islam and all this stuff that can't be questioned.
Yes. So
there's a lot of reason for the hatred and I think a lot of it's ignorance, that people just don't understand the nature of what's going on.
Right.
And then we get possessed by ideology.
Yep.
And it turns into this, I'm in a camp against the other camp.
Yes.
And that is the human condition.
Yes. It's sad to hear about it, because those fixed points of perception that aren't flexible in their consciousness, that's what ultimately creates a lot of the conflict, because some of the Jews that I have met, you wouldn't even know they were Jewish, really, because they don't have a lot of the traits of the other ones that I've dealt with, because there's different types of Muslims, there's different types of Christians, there's different types of Jews. And to make blanket statements about any of the Jews or the Christians or the Hindus is just bad communication. So I think that if people ask me that in public, what I stand for equality and equal criticism across the board. They don't get a free pass. They have to answer for what they've done.
And this started early on with Russell Means and your time. Let's hear a little bit about that before we come back to, because that was influential.
Yeah, Russell Means was a really close friend of mine that I asked to interview him as a suggestion from somebody else.
Years ago.
Many, many years ago. He's a very close friend of mine, and I knew his wife very well. I knew him very well. And I got involved with him specifically because he asked me to bring cold fusion into the American Indian Territory, because he discovered what it was. He heard me discuss it in public, and he said, what a great way to decentralize from everything, and we can be our own country, and we can have our own power, and we can be American Indians again. That's why the initial thing that brought me together with him.
And what is, can you go into a little bit about cold fusion, then go back to Russell, and then we'll go back to
the cold fusion today, that's called LENR is the name for it. Low energy nuclear reactions is the new name for it. But when people hear cold fusion, they think of, oh, that's the movie with Val Kilmer called The Saint. I said, yep, that's what it's about. And that whole structure of the movie is what the whole controversy is about. But there was one point where people didn't think that any of that was true, but now today I know it's very true, and we're about that far away from that coming out to the world. And I have been involved with that behind the scenes for a long, long time, since '89. In fact, I was filmed for a documentary called The Believers. They had the cameras on me at a specific point when they're at a point with all the scientists where they're deciding via third-party verification whether they're actually creating excess heat it's called. And I already knew that it was, and they caught me on camera because a particular scientist got verified that he actually did this cold fusion experiment, and they have that. Now, then came, okay, now that we can agree that we have this reaction, can we commercialize it and make use of this? So it was during that time that Russell Means was the very first public figure to stand behind a technology that had so much controversy behind it. He was the first one. Not many people know that. And the entire Lakota Sioux government are going to be the first government and people to be donated a device, and it will be for what will be the Russell Means library or some museum that's dedicated. They haven't decided exactly how they're going to put it in, but he was the first. Really, it wasn't a celebrity or some scientist or anything. He put his name, his entire reputation behind that. He was the first to do that.
And people trusted him.
Yes, they did, because he was
freedom fighter.
the legitimate freedom fighter that was respected worldwide, all over the place where he went. He was always respected.
And you helped develop one of the big protests. What was the name of it?
Yeah, I was involved. I was the trigger man for the Standing Rock Standoff event, where the whole world.
What do you mean trigger man?
I got a phone call to.
And this is what year?
I don't remember exactly what year it was. I mean, it was all over the papers, all over the world. And I got a phone call from Russell Means' secretary. Russell passed away. I became very friendly with his secretary and best friend and his wife. And they called me and said, they're attacking the American Indians on their own land while they were trying to protect their rights for the water because they're building an oil pipeline thing. Yeah. And I said, what? They're attacking? What do you mean they're attacking? They got private contractors out there, like with sniper rifles, aiming at them. And there's this protest, and it started off very small. And before you knew it, the whole world heard about it. It was all over the news. Every major thing was there. So I got a phone call, and it was... They said, can you help us? I said, give me some information and give me 2 days. And I was introduced to Wesley Clark Jr., the son of the general. And I met with him in Los Angeles. And I put him on the phone with Phyllis Young, who's probably the most influential American Indian in the country. And before you knew it, without too much reservation or regret, he made an order in and called in the vets from all over the country. They not only came from all over the country, they came from all over the world to come in and stand up and defend what was happening to the American Indians as they were defending their territorial rights and land, and they were actually attacking civilians in America by private contractors.
Right. On their land, yeah.
On their land, right? And I was brought in, and I was really, really angry about it, because our own government, at that time, it was Barack Obama was president. But people don't realize that he set that whole thing up, because he met with the Lakota people and was on their land like years beforehand, because I knew the head of the tribe at that point, because I'd been talking to him about cold fusion. I had a relationship with them already. So they knew I was fairly connected, and it was me and Wesley Clark that arranged for the vets to come in and protect the American Indians from the private contractors. And you'll see a very famous picture that was in the New York Times of the American Indian standing on his horse, and right behind him is like this big, military van, and the horse and this contractor here. And that what really happened there. I mean, press came from all over the world, and a lot of people exploited that whole event. And
CIA probably got in and tried to twist it and make it
well,
discredit a lot of it.
any time there's a big crowd for a political thing,
Yeah.
they're there.
There's bad actors.
They're always there.
To make it
The January
discredit the
6th.
whole
I mean,
thing.
anything like where there's going to
Black
be
Panthers.
yes,
all of it.
always they get infiltrated and something gets screwed up. It happens every single time.
Yeah.
So I was with writing letters with Crow Dog, who was their spiritual leader at that time, and I was in the conference room when people were calling all over the world because something interesting happened there. Is they geoengineered the event before the event took place. All the vets were coming in, and they geoengineered the weather. And by the time they showed up, there was like the biggest snowstorm ever. And I knew that they engineered it because I went up to the snow and said, "This isn't real snow." And the Indians know real snow, right? And Phyllis Young was aware of this, and they tried to stop this because it was totally humiliating for not only the American Indians, because nobody came to protect them except the vets. They came in without hesitation, actually, from all over the world. I'll never forget it because the energy at that location at that time, it was indescribable. And I remember talking to Russell Means' widow, Pearl, about it, and she wasn't able to make it there because all the flights were booked. People were driving in from all over the place. There was I forgot how many exact amount of people were there, but they were stopping people from coming because millions were coming.
Wow.
Millions.
Amazing.
And it all started from the drum.
Wow.
And you know what the drum is. You know it's a technology.
Yeah.
And it's a technology that most white people in other cultures don't even understand. But it started from that. And they were drumming. There's drum circles going on during that time. And I knew exactly what was going on. But the energy of the place was unbelievable. That's where Tulsi Gabbard came in. I met her and I told her what was going on. And I said, when I was in the conference room, I said, "You're not going to read this anywhere." Because I did interviews with loads of newspapers. None of them came out. Not one. Nobody even knew that I had anything to do with it. I didn't care. I didn't need it.
The message was important.
Yes. There are injured people. There's people freezing. It was a horrible scene, but it was most horrible because our own government, the president, Barack Obama, didn't do anything. You can see him on TV say, "We're going to just let this play out." Jeez. Because it was done by design. And he has to answer for that eventually, because I'll eventually face off with him about that, because he set it up that way. And because he could have stopped these private contractors and could have stopped all the violence.
Sure.
He could have done it. But they watched it on TV, and it was exploited. And there's still lawsuits going on from it today. And there's people that were permanently physically damaged from it.
And the water supply is ruined, probably.
Yeah, there's already leaking in there, because the conflict was not just about the land and the yet another violation of a broken promise from white people
Sure.
to the Indians, is how they perceive it. It was the fact that they couldn't spend the extra money to go around.
Right.
They didn't have to go through. They didn't want to go around.
Exactly.
They figured if they just go right through, these people are so weak, they're not going to be able to do anything. They won't be able to fight us, et cetera, et cetera. And that was disgusting. And also it's disgusting that they didn't stop the violence.
So how did it end? What happened?
It was right around towards Christmas, and the campsite had thousands of people, and I was the hotel next to the campsite was totally full. There was no hotels for people to stay. It was like packed everywhere. And I was just there for.
Was there porta potties? Was it sanitary? How'd that go?
Oh, it was.
Horrible.
It I can only like Woodstock, like
That's what I'm
that.
thinking. Yeah.
The amount of people was going on there, but the electricity and the energy of the air. Because I asked Russell Means' widow Pearl about it, and I was because it was unlike anything I've ever felt. And she said, "Well, you were there for the reunion of the ancestors were there. They were all there." And when she told me that, I went, "That's exactly right. It's exactly right." Because it was one of the very few times where I saw black, white, red, yellow, and brown people come together for that thing. And then probably the most important moment there was when they did the healing ceremony inside the hotel, where they had a specific ceremony where the vets and the people responsible for a lot of the slaughters apologized. And it was filmed. It was put in it's in a documentary film that Phyllis Young is on the cover, was nominated for a bunch of awards. And the thing behind it all, which was interesting that never got any coverage, was that they were the government and first people to put cold fusion in their minutes, their government minutes, because they didn't want to go oil. They want to be in harmony with the land. And that was really a lot of what was going on there, because in all the interviews that I did, I mentioned all that they were involved, because it had to do with energy and money, right? And I said, well, these people are trying to set an example, and you're doing this. And of course, none of that came out ever. Nothing. So don't ever think in this country, just because you've read whatever it is or heard it, that's probably not the whole story ever, because there's people from all over the world there. And I didn't. I left after about 4 days, and then the camp still stayed open, and it slowly started to dwindle because everybody pulled back eventually, because there's just too much negative publicity against the administration, against the White House. I mean, it was very embarrassing for them, and I made it that way and wanted it that way because, like I said to you before, it's not just me, but I have a lot of problems with people that are in positions of power, and then they abuse that power, and worse, they get off on it. They get off on abusing that power of somebody that's in a weaker position. It's one thing is abusing it, but when you get off on it, because I saw it for myself, and that pissed off a lot of people, including me. And there was, effects followed me after that, but I don't regret it at all. And the documentaries that are out about that don't cover any of that. I was supposed to be interviewed in the cut that Phyllis Young started, and they cut out everything I said. There was film commissions that said, "Get that guy out of there. Don't let him talk. Get him out. We're not going to finance this. We're not going to distribute it if he's in there." And the director was like, "Well, this whole event was because of him and Wesley Clark."
What narrative were they trying to push then?
They were the narrative that's in the film. It was just about the territorial dispute and the oil company and ruining their water. But there was way more going on there than that.
Sure.
And they didn't want me talking about the money, the abuse, the violation of all the code, the cold fusion. They didn't want any of that in there.
And they knew they had to cover it.
Yeah.
A lot of times you put out a narrative that's like, let's cover it because people know about it, but in a way that's really catered to.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there was like
they're going to do with Africa.
Right.
Getting back to Africa.
Exactly. It's a similar thing going on.
That's why I wanted to go back to that, because that's where your roots came from.
Yeah. Because
you know what they're going to do.
Well, I also know that yes,
like 9/11.
Yeah.
Now they're going to come out with a story, and here the 9/11 commission, blah blah blah, and you're like, that has nothing to do with the truth.
Yeah. Right. And then I just informed the Lakota Sioux Tribal Council.
Or COVID, they do it with that. Oh,
Yes.
here's the new COVID, blah blah blah, and how with the vaccine.
Yeah.
But it's like, here's a crumb.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the Lakota government knows about the brain computer interface. I did a full briefing for them. They're going to probably institute some kind of thing in their recodification of their laws, because the Papal Bull Agreement, and how the Vatican still had them in their writings is subhuman. That's all been removed, and the Pope was going to come over there, and then they didn't meet because he got sick or whatever. At the moment, and people don't know this, they're probably the freest people in the world. And they're free because they've had to fight for their existence every single day under horrible conditions. They know the law. They constantly fight for their freedom, and they're decentralizing and cutting themselves off from this big, gigantic mess of world government that they're trying to create. This is a small tribe. The Fort Laramie Treaty and the Lakota Sioux government are very specific. They're very different than other tribes all over the country. They're the radicals, and they're the ones on the front line.
Wow.
They're the warriors. They're the spirit warriors, those people, for sure.
I'd love to talk to some of these leaders.
I'll arrange it.
Yeah, that'd be beautiful.
Yeah, and you will be incredibly surprised that a matriarch society can be so tough, inspiring, and wise, because the women rule there, not the men.
Wow.
And the way they institute justice is quite different than what we are used to.
Wow.
So they're still trying to salvage and maintain their language. They're still in lawsuits right now. They've got people going on their land trying to take gold, companies that haven't paid them, because there's a lot of minerals and resources in the sacred Black Hills, which is where Russell's home really was. Those are sacred to them. And I was very, very honored to be invited and participate in a drum circle with them by invitation. This was after Russell was gone, and I got to see them in their private cultural thing going on, and it was totally life-changing, very life-changing to see that and how they interface with each other and outsiders. Because remember, their dance was outlawed at one point. I mean, a lot of these ridiculous restrictions that were placed on them. So I got very close to them and have a.
Is that where Quanah Parker came in and brought peyote up from Mexico during the older days, way before that? But
probably, yes.
When their dance was banned. And,
yes, and
that became the new spiritual sacrament.
Yes, and it was
legal.
It was done for many reasons, but there had a special moment for Russell there, and I'll never forget that as they were dancing and doing their drums, and it got the sun's coming down, and then out comes from over the hill all the buffalo come in, and they surrounded everybody.
Wow.
In front of all of us.
That's amazing.
And I couldn't be more happier that I got to participate and witness and be a guest there to see that. So it was amazing. Amazing.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
And you spent a lot of time with Russell.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with him in Los Angeles when he lived there, and when he was doing his play there, he invited me to his play, and I'd call him up and I'd go to dinner at his house, and then I'd tell him all the technological changes, and he tried to explain to me how he was trying to completely decentralize, and he wanted the energy component to decentralize, which was the whole point. Not just for American Indians, for everybody. We're at that point where we should be doing things like that. But that's a big, very controversial question that people are going to have to face, and people are going to have to demand these things from the manufacturers when they build these things. There's all these new possibilities and new possibilities of decentralization. Yes, oh, completely. We're actually, I've always said this, and when people look into it, we should be celebrating actually, because we can fix everything.
Right.
That's the truth of the matter.
Technological means,
yes,
but the ideology behind it, the incentive structures.
Correct. Yes, we could all.
There's an abundance possibility in it.
Yes,
getting back in tune with nature and synergy.
Absolutely, because we've lost that aspect of ourselves.
So decentralization is the underlying answer
at the moment. Yeah, and until there's a major attitude adjustment from the people that feel like they can, that they can rule by divine right as kings and decide. Until that is dealt with, decentralization is the answer, because most people I know are watching very closely what's happening, and they don't want to participate. They want to move out and away and get away from this whole thing, because they see how anti-human it is, how inhumane it is, and that humans and human families are looked down upon, and we're being replaced by robots, and the families being disintegrated, and
like a commodity.
Yeah, and I just heard last 48 hours that Bill Gates is going to take the last of his 400 billion or whatever it is, and he's going to put it all into Africa.
Yeah, I wonder why.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. And things like this, that we're at this just very strange point. I remember when they had, I guess it was in 2012, they had it was a big cyclical event, like the end of time. I remember talking with Howard about it, actually, and what that would mean. I think I was in the jungle during that moment.
I like Terrence McKenna used to say time wave zero.
Yes. Yeah, a total new cycle comes in.
Which was about when everyone had a smartphone.
Yes.
Which changed everything.
Yes.
Supercomputer in your pocket, that's just like a paradigm shift.
Yep. And the phones
that create a new species.
Completely, because these phones they got now, people are going to look back at them like they're garbage. Because the new ones, they'll be in your shirt, and they'll be flexible, and the 6G is going to completely change communications forever. You'll call somebody and they'll show up on a hologram right in front of you, and that's how it will be. And people will fall into that, and it will completely change how we interface with each other. So 6G and the components of 6Gs and the tower and what it's going to do to self-driving, energy consumption, cognitive fluidity, mental health as a whole,
isolation,
all of that. They're betting on our compliance with all that, so that we won't be in a functional state to make good decisions anymore. And that's what it will be fused with the brain, and that's the whole plan. I always try and tell people, did you see the movie Elysium? See the movie Elysium, and the people that with all the money and all the tech, that's pretty close to accurate where they're aiming. And all the rest of the people don't have anything, and they're just, dwindling in population. This is where we're at, because the storage isn't going to be in servers any longer. It's going to be neuro storage.
Yeah, each person.
Yes, it's neuro storage, and then from what I can tell,
because the brain is the most complex computer we've ever encountered.
Right, with more neural connections than
the universe.
Yes.
So we just have, once they tap into the capacity and how to use it and harvest, and it's interesting.
Yeah. So I'm excited and terrified at the same time. of what we do, because we certainly like to learn things the hard way.
I'd love to get into some of your personal journey with plant medicines, which is how we met, and how you hold this container, knowing what you know and how you've inherited this life of weird stuff that no one knows about, how alienating that can be. Some of that, because I think people need to hear some of that, and I'd like to know it.
Well,
but
I
need to take a break.
Yeah. You want to take a break now? Okay. All right.
Just
Perfect.
a moment.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
All right. So getting back to more of your personal journey, and maybe we start with some of the earlier times you were with Walter, and you were using a little bit of cannabis, maybe a little mushrooms, but then it led you to eventually
Right.
Howard, where we met.
Yeah. So,
and then also the negatives of psychedelics and the stuff you learned.
Okay. So I was like at a previous, before everything changed for me, I was like borderline professional athlete. No drugs, no alcohol, no nothing ever. I just didn't want to be part of any of it because I didn't see any positive anything into it. I just saw like alcoholism and negativity and da. I was completely ignorant and didn't know anything, nothing. Then after I'd got to know Walter and was actually living with him in this house in Santa Monica.
In your 20s,
much later than that. In my 30s, okay. I didn't do anything until I was 36.
Wow.
So I was having a lot of problems. Nothing. Okay. I didn't know what an altered state was at all. I didn't even think it was possible. So I was very depressed, having a lot of personal problems. I wasn't sure how to construct my life. I felt very alienated from my experience. I wasn't happy. Walter Bowart, I didn't know who I was sitting with in terms of psychedelics, really. I knew intellectually, but I didn't know because I had no experience at all.
And what do you mean by that? What he was so tied into the psychedelic movement?
Yes, he was influential, one of the most influential, because he testified for Congress about LSD, saying that not to ban this stuff until you actually do it. Do it and then decide if to ban it.
And he also knew the negative implications of how it was being used.
Yeah, he knew the negative. Yes,
but he was still about cognitive liberty.
Well, he said you should have, and I agree with him, that you should have the right to do what you want to do. It's your mind and it's your body.
Yeah.
And if you want to alternate your consciousness with a psychedelic or some type of plant medicine or whatever, you should be allowed to do that.
Right.
As long as, nobody's being hurt, etc. So we were in Santa Monica, California. We were in the house, and it was late in the evening, and a friend of his brought over some grass that he had, and he was a major stoner. I mean, no big deal to him. So he broke it out and had a long joint in front of him, and he just started smoking it, and he kept on passing it to me like this, like, here, you want some?
Like automatic.
Yeah, automatic. Pass the joint, And I was like, no. And then he kept on doing it. And then eventually I just said, okay. Because I was like really sensitive about it. Like, I don't want to hurt my lungs, and I don't want to do this. And then I said, fuck it. I don't care anymore. Because I was so upset by so many things.
And how long had you known him up to this point?
Like at least 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
Because he moved into LA, because then we started getting really organized what we were doing. And then the plants came in. So one day he passed it over, and I said, all right, fine. And so I still remember he gives me this joint, and I'm smoking it, and I'm like, well, this just isn't working. Nothing was working. And he keep smoking. And then all of a sudden, then it kicks in, and I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. Like, I had my whole body felt different. I was in a state of shock, and complete. It was like the
Catatonic.
yeah. I my lights turned on. I felt like I was awake
Yeah.
for the first time ever.
Wow.
It was a dramatic, major change happened.
Almost psychedelic.
Yes. And that first round I ever did with him, I'm so happy he was the guy. It was now that I learned more about him, it's a total honor
Yeah.
when I say that this is the guy that first started.
Because you could also be weird in front of him and be you. And
Yeah, because I could let loose, and it's exactly what I did in front of him, and it was just hilarious. And he was so enthralled by it that he started taking notes on everything that I was saying, because it completely changed um, um, my experience and understanding of things and the way I explain things. He was, for some reason, I don't know why, but he was just fascinated by what I was saying. So he started that, and then I started to ask more questions about, well, what else have you done? Because I wanted to know. Now I was very interested because I'd never really been in an alternative state and what that is.
yeah.
So that turned into and changed everything. So
It's like you step beyond the veil.
yeah. I'm like, okay, what's MDMA like? What's LSD like? What's angel dust like? What's this like? I didn't want to do any of the cocaine or hard, nasty stuff. I wanted to do that's mushrooms. I want to do all of it. I want to do all of it because I wanted to know what the hell I missed. Because I really did not understand what the 60s were about or anything.
Yeah, but in that moment, you could see. You're like, oh,
Yes.
this is
Yes.
a different plane.
Yeah, and then I could really understand why they
Music,
wanted to
culture.
legislate and control all that stuff, because it dissolves a lot of barriers and boundaries. We did a tremendous amount of R&D, specialized work on mushrooms. We created companies and decided whether they're going to be on mushrooms.
Okay.
We created a specific one that would consult with film companies on how to enhance for advertising, language, and all this other stuff. When we were consulting with production companies, that all was born from mushrooms. He would use it for meetings that we would go into.
Mushrooms.
He would offer cannabis if especially if there was a lot of initial conflict.
Because it would just drop that
Yes.
boundary.
Yeah, and I to this day when I saw Graham Hancock suggest that all the elected officials would have to pass the bud before any discussions take place to get everybody relaxed and drop all the egos and dissolve everything, get out of their titles and all their crap.
But except I always feel now I've met people that do all the psychedelics and cannabis and everything, and they're psychopaths. They amplify that.
Yes.
So I never believe that anymore.
Yes.
But I get when it's a good personality structure,
yes.
the right setting,
right,
it can be very beneficial.
Right. In the right setting, done with the right thing, it's going to be very beneficial. It's not for everybody. It's not a fix all for everything, but it's a definite tool that I learned was given to us. The plants are a technology,
and it's a connector in a way.
Yes, and it's when I started doing the cannabis that then he took much more interest in me and what I had to say, what I was doing. He recorded it, he wrote it. It was used for screenplays. It was used for all sorts of material. We were doing hypnosis experiments. We were doing sensory deprivation experiments. We were doing telepathy experiments. I was already doing telepathy experiments with another contactee by the name of Marianne Shenefield, because I knew Andrea Bowart, who wrote the book Beyond Telepathy. This is all before anybody was really talking about this.
Yeah.
Like today, there's a podcast called The Telepathy Tapes.
Yeah, and if you talk back then, your whole reputation was ruined.
Yes, because these are people, I've always dealt with people that are way ahead of what's going on in culture. So I decided after getting used to plants and having relationships with them and growing them and trying different types, that I really wanted to go for it this time, because he was the king of LSD, but he hadn't done ayahuasca. So I planned for a year in advance to do that. And I really got to a point where it was the perfect point to do it because I was so disgusted and sick of what was going on and not sure whether to go left or right or what I was going to do next. And then I read about Howard. I found him online just randomly, and I looked at his website and I started reading and studying books because then I understood the reason why Walter was so intent on not only allowing somebody to have the liberty to alter their consciousness by their own will, but how important it is to have free thought as well.
Not be influenced.
Yes, because when I did the first thing of cannabis, I was stunned that I looked and thought differently about things. Like
Changed you forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
Forever. It's one of the best things that ever happened to me, actually. In fact, if I look back at everything, it's one of the best things that ever happened. And I'm glad it was him. But then I voluntarily did experiments with him with MDMA, with different species of mushrooms. Then I did. We specifically did it in a very controlled environment with him and psychiatrist, a psychologist there. So I really wanted to do it properly because I wanted to hear what they had to say.
And that they've been using these things too.
Yeah, in their practice, but they're very hush-hush about it.
It was all the underground stuff.
Yeah, totally. And
people like Robert Forte too, who pushed the MDMA underground.
Yes, and when I did MDMA, it was a horrible experience. It was like that's the one I really wanted to try because I've heard these great stories, and then for me, it was horrible. It did the opposite to me. It was very sad, very depressed, very everything. And then I did the Amanita muscaria with him, which was totally different. And I was learning how these tools are and how they have been throughout history used to influence the culture. And I still use the tools today, but then I was ready to go for the real plunge and go down to the jungle and go through the whole process. And I did that with Howard, thankfully, back when it really wasn't popularized at all. And I'm so happy because it's a mess now. Yeah. I went down there and I prepared for a year and then went down there alone. I didn't tell anybody I was going. And it was like a bomb going off, basically. It was a bomb that went off inside of me. But it got rid of a lot of stuff and installed new stuff for sort of like an upgrade of James 2.0 type of thing. And I went down a lot. I didn't tell anybody I was doing it. And I really went through the vanishing point, and it was very, very, very painful for me physically. Not more physically than mentally. And I swore to God I would never do that again. Of course I did, but like most people. But it was probably one of the best tools I gave to myself to let go of a lot of baggage that I was carrying around, because I'd always be confronted by Walter telling me when I was stuck somewhere or with something. He says, "Are you going to walk backwards into your future for the rest of your life or what? Or are you going to let this go and
purge it?"
Yes. Yeah. Because you can get stuck. And when you get stuck with things, or you're in a state of perceptual paralysis or something, then you do want to bring in the plants or whatever to get out of it, because it's a great loosening agent and also the use of these plants when I was dealing with Walter told me enormous amount about how perception works and how we perceive our world, how we're deciding what we perceive. And then after doing it once, I did ayahuasca once. Then I came back and did wachuma, the cactus, which was totally different. And I was privy to do that with somebody that was specialized, Howard, with that, at all the sacred temples which added a completely, totally different layer to it, because then I could see why these plants were designed very specifically in conjunction with the architecture and location and venue at the time you did them,
Right.
and what the purpose of them was. And I was basically given a lot of information from the ancient world about all that when I was in where the lands Chavin, yes, specifically Chavin, because it's a very specific place, and it's inside the mountain. So we actually consumed under the right conditions and the way it was set up, did the prayers, prepared everything, and then we went inside the mountain and shut all the lights off, and then did the cactus. And some people couldn't handle it, but because there's no sound.
Man, I always wish I could have done that with him.
Oh my God. I
got to hear all the stories, but it's like, geez, what a beautiful opportunity.
Oh, I knew when it was going on that this was a once in a lifetime thing. You probably weren't going to be back, and to shut everything down and listen, just listen and take it all in here. And it was a special moment that I had there at the land zone inside the mountain, because when the lights are off, you're on cactus in a group of people. You can't see anybody, and there's no sound. So you have some people panic because there's complete sensory deprivation, and then telepathy takes over. And some people, when they haven't experienced that before or can't remember that they used to do it, they panic. Yeah, some people will be invaded and vulnerable. Correct. Yeah. And maybe invaded, vulnerable, and
seen for the felt.
Yes, yes. So I remember that it bonded everybody in the group in a very quick, fast, fair way. So
like a leveler.
Yeah, a leveler. And then as we exited the land zone and then walked around in the environment, how it fused us all together like we're a family that had known each other for like 10 years.
Yeah.
Immediately. There was a camaraderie, brotherhood, sisterhood, and a sacred space between one being and another being. And it was like there's
empathy almost.
Yes, and an installation of respect as well. And there's something about doing the cactus at that altitude, that high up, because to get there, I mean, Howard told me people would come from all over the world to the land zone, but remember, they go on foot. And we drove through the mountains and went for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours way out there. And you get up there, and I remember having like the worst altitude headache. And then the next day we were doing Wachuma, and I knew at that altitude, your biochemistry is quite different and your response to it. And it was totally like a house cleaning of your consciousness. All the garbage out, and a complete redefining of what you're here to do, why you're here doing it, your relationship to your temple, your body, what's going on between these temples here in your mind. And it was that was one of the best experiences I ever had, because I realized that it's not just the medicine that you're taking, it's the venue, and that's critical.
The trust of the person that gave it to you, and that whole sacred.
Yeah, because it's interesting. We go to locations, and the architecture was built for the plant. You don't see that.
And from it.
Yeah, from it, right. And so you go out in front of this architecture in the land zone, and you realize that it's built to play music from the wind. Right. But you don't hear that under normal conditions because there's a breeze. But when you go on that stuff, your senses are amplified a lot, and you can hear
And that vision to create that space probably came from eating the cactus.
Yes. Yeah.
It was all synergistically built.
Yes. And then when you're in there, inside the cave, you can feel that the other people that were there, it's like they leave a residual energy or memory in the venue when you're there. You can feel all of it. So it's like you're in a group of all these natives and people from all over that come, because they were traveling from way up and 1,000 miles away. Some people would come out of the country to that location, because as you know, that's where kind of the birth of shamanism began, was there. So a very significant place, but it was that experience that pretty much solidified and confirmed, what are you doing, where are you going, and why are you doing it, type of thing. And that didn't, Walter did not have that. I had that. He also did not have ayahuasca, because at that point his health was starting to fail. So I brought it to him. So it changed our relationship, because I had done something he had not. He didn't do. And he suggested it, because he was the one that he was the doorman for me, that said, go that way, type of thing. And then it was during that time, right after that, is when his health started to fail, and we started making decisions about what we were going to do with all this R&D that we had, and the plans that we see that are unfolding in culture today. We knew it because we had key people behind the scenes, very open, coming to us saying what the plans were, that they intended to reduce the population. They intended to create a mutation in our behavior and who we are. And all these intentions were going on. I'm like, okay.
And they're still open about it. The Great Reset.
Yeah. They're not hiding.
No,
not hiding at
right.
all.
The playbook's here.
Yeah. Then I deal with people daily that the bankers, and I hear about it secondhand, sometimes firsthand, of what they're doing and how long it's been put in place and how long it's been worked on for years and years and years. Because the real story about who almost took over the world economy has never really come out. Only a handful of people really know the true details about that. And when I've interfaced with these people, one in particular, he wrote his master's thesis on the underworld economy. And when you read it, it's like looking at a foreign language, because people don't know any of these banking terms or what negotiable instruments are and what SWIFT codes were made for, and how they decided to. They knew that when they electrocuted money from the birth of the internet, that changed currency permanently, and they were going to take that and create debt instruments to put everybody in debt, give all the money to the bank, and then take over the world. That's how they basically stole the world through fraud, through technology that they put out that allowed them to do it. And that's what they do. They set all that up. We walk right into it, and then they benefit from it. That's how they do it.
What do you think about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency? And
I've had so many people come to me and ask me about that, and I say, until such time as there's a clean, energy efficient thing that feeds the server, you don't have a currency,
because you don't fixing the underlying.
Yeah, because
it's like the Africa thing. You can't go make a trade when the whole infrastructure is
right. With any cryptocurrency, including Bitcoin, it took energy to manufacture the coin.
Right.
It's electricity.
So it's being built on top of a broken system.
Yes, and that people are traversing into that, thinking that will be the only answer, and it won't be. There'll be other things that happen as well. But I said it's not really a currency if you don't own the energy that it came into. Plus, it can vanish in a moment's notice, which has happened to many people, because cryptocurrency unless it's backed by a hard asset. Because I had the Roger Ver and other people in the Bitcoin world, I talked with them and I said, well, wouldn't you like a cryptocurrency that was run by cold fusion? And that changed everything behind the scenes because people don't really know about that yet. The senior people in key positions know that currencies are going to come out that are going to be based and backed by that, because the United States, they are supporting the deployment of LENR cold fusion, but not for electricity generation. Why? Everybody knows why.
It's failing.
Because once you're at that point and you can have your own energy source in your home, you don't need anybody anymore. You don't need to talk to anybody over there. And then it becomes to the point where, govern thyself or be governed.
So what's going to prevent cold fusion from advancing?
It will probably, I hope not, come out last in the U.S. Based upon what's happening right now. European countries will get it first because they want it first, and they're not putting up all this nonsense fights about it. That's the way it stands today. But there's a sort of task force that's been assigned to go in and begin to set the industry standards of what that's going to be in the deployment. I'm involved with that. And then how to integrate that into a person's house. And they're going to be doing it through the heating world first. So it will go into heating units because that's the most sensible and easiest, and you can integrate that into your home. So the device will be retrofitted into a heater, a boiler specifically, and the reaction will happen inside the boiler. And the genius in engineering that's occurred to make this whole thing possible was being able to turn it off, turn it on at will, and turn it up and turn it down at will. That was an engineering feat that they're past now. They've got that. That used to be a huge, huge secret, because a lot of people got mad at me and really pissed in certain places because I was emphasizing that had taken place already. And I was supporting a lot of the scientists that were out there. They're actually doing that. And all the big people that people would suspect would be involved with this are. And this is what I say because I will be criticized for this, because I know who's going to analyze it and run with this conversation. The Navy was the first really to test it, and they got as far as like 11 to 13x, which means 13 times more energy coming out than going in. That's what that term means. The sense it means over unity, right? So once they got to that position, the Navy, they're very public about that, and all of a sudden it all stopped, and nobody heard anything after that. And people really don't realize who the Navy is and how much that they are the leading arm of the military for the Earth. For the Earth, really. People know about that. So I am sure,
just
without a doubt,
it's mostly water.
Because they have to protect the waters, and they've been around the longest, the Navy aspect of military, in terms of control.
So there's more money, more technology.
Yes, and they are way, way, way ahead of where the public thinks. And it's caused the schism that we're in today about the deployment of new technology and new information that's coming to the public. And I already know, and I said it before, that the Navy probably is utilizing LENR cold fusion already, but they just call it something else, and they can keep it secret because there's a separate corner for black budget technology, as well as the patent and ownership of that. So by the time stuff gets out to us, it's already been used over here for tactical advantage of things. But
is that what the aircraft that are going in water and then up into the air, is that our stuff, our Navy, or is it alien?
Both. And the
that
orbs,
we maybe learn from them.
Yeah, they're all of I learned from and was told by Doris Van Tassel, who was the wife of George Van Tassel, who was one of the big, very well-known contactees from the 50s that has the Integratron that's located out in California. The Integratron was the first kind of technology given to humans by a specific group, and that model was built for specific reasons. But I lived with Doris Van Tassel for a short time, for about a year, while she was alive. So I heard the whole story of what's really going on from that position. And Walter and I, we inherited the Gabriel Green Amalgamated Flying Saucer Club of America trove of research and membership, because it was a membership of contactees from all over the world and having these experiences. And the organized group, it was the first organized group, was based in California. And Gabriel Green was the first contactee that ran for president that actually got votes. And so this has been going on a long time. So regardless of people say, oh, it's fake or it's real, whatever, it as my friend wrote in his book, UFOs are the gods from inner space, not outer space. And the UFO world really doesn't like to talk about that because they leave out the observer of the phenomena when they interface with it, because it does have it does modify behavior and distorts perception when you interface with it. And there's a lot of information that's not coming out that should come out, but it's completely saturated and turned into a big commercial now, because you got Spielberg is going to come out and do this follow-up to Close Encounters, which will have disinformation for sure. And then Barry Soetoro is financing the Betty and Barney Hill story about that abduction case that took place back east. That's coming out, and that's interesting since he's involved in that world and has been behind the scenes.
Is that to distract and divert, or is that going to be to tell more of the truth?
It'll be spoon-fed little bits at a time, I think. I don't think they'd lie about everything. I think they need for this to come out now, because it's just way out of control. And it's interesting that the public's barely responding to it.
Distraction.
Yeah, they're all distracted. They don't just realize, they're talking about extraterrestrials taking over the White House and the government in Congress in front and having hearings. Yeah. Oh, how was your day?
Exactly.
Yeah, and then
back to the news.
Yeah, back to the vomit.
Sports.
Yeah. So these things are going on, and these people, there's a lot of serious people involved.
And that seems almost like a testing of where's the public perception at.
Yes.
Like, oh, they're not responsive.
Yes, that's right.
Like,
or they're what they want is for you not to respond.
Exactly.
If they go walking down the street, okay, back to the whatever, and there's no response because
it's like COVID with masks.
Yes.
Mandates, and nobody cared.
Yes, exactly. So it's
like, oh, it's for your safety.
Yeah. We were extremely privileged to have that all given to us from people I knew. And I remember when we got the phone call to pick it all up, Walter and I hopped in his van and we drove all the way down to Palm Springs to get it, to pick it all up. And then we brought it back. And I've done some interviews about the contents of all these diaries and minutes that they were having with all these people. People were coming from all over the world out to where Joshua Tree is because of the UFO activity in that area. Like famous people, big name people were there from all over the world. And remember back then, to get 50,000 people out there during those communication times, that was all paper and mail.
Yeah.
And they all were coming there. And then they built that device out there. And most people don't know where all that came from. They see all the modern stuff with the same whistleblowers coming out and saying stuff. But the really good information regarding that is all the old stuff before the internet came, before it was all commercialized. And now it's a business.
Yeah.
And you've got
distraction.
Yeah. It's a distraction. And People call me all the
and
time,
to muddle it up with things to discredit and make
yeah.
it confusing.
Yes. It's just like a drama now. I mean, I've seen people come into the area and their whole identity is based upon.
So do you know Stephen Greer? I don't remember.
Yeah, I've interviewed him a long time ago. I did talk to him before he's the Greer of today. And I would just say, you better do your research. You better do your research. And
What do you think he's up to? He's working for who?
well, I think he's partially captured. I think he's semi-compromised.
I feel like that's one of the missing interviews on Rogan. Like he removed about 11 or some. I feel like his is one of them.
Well, a lot of people have problems with him, and I hear it all day long now. All day long now. Anybody that comes out and says he's the world authority on that subject, you need to stop in a minute, because there are no world authorities. And if there is an authority, it would be somebody that would bring out the aliens and show them right in front of you. That would be an authority. So he's not really, because there's people behind the scenes with way bigger name than him that were trying to bring this out. Some of them were CIA directors, some of them were other people that you heard that wanted all this to come out. And he was put into play for a reason.
What about Bob Lazar?
I had a phone call with him and a guy named Lars Hansen when it first happened. There's an affidavit online called UFOs, Who's Fooling Whom, the true story of John Lear and the whole cover-up. It's online somewhere. And I was there as that was happening. And when Lazar came out, I believed him because I already knew that the backstory to that way news all over the world at that time. But that was also around when Penthouse magazine first published those photos. That was world news for like 2 days, and then it was gone.
You helped be a part of that.
Yeah. I took the pictures and I explained it to him. I mean, I was there to talk to him about cold fusion because he was putting all his money in nuclear. And I said, this is what's really going on. This is what you really should do. And then I told him the whole backstory of the photograph. And the photograph was there were models of the bodies used as training devices for recovery teams to desensitize the shock of dealing with the process of dealing with the bodies. That's what they were for. That's what it is. So, and I told Bob that when I met him and what they're for and why I was giving it to him at this time and all that stuff. So that happened. And then right around that is when Lazar came out of nowhere. And I spoke to him briefly. I didn't get to meet him. I've never met him. But the guy I was working with at that time did, and I did believe him. I think he's one of the more credible people, actually, because at that time, nobody would even think of doing something like that. I mean, he chopped his head off at that point. And it changed. He'll never be looked at for anything other than that.
And he's never really seeked anything.
No. In fact, it became a problem for him doing that, what he did. But there was people like Bud Hopkins, John Mack, Dr. John Mack, that was, I think he was at Princeton, psychiatrist in Princeton, that gave up his career to tell the truth about the whole abduction thing, because I was actually one of the most interesting calls I ever had was with John Mack, Walter Bowart, and myself, all on the phone, all sort of like independent pioneer people, all adoptees. We were all adopted children. And he was the psychiatrist that at that time was investigating the case that took place in South Africa, where all the school children saw this thing land. It's a very famous case, and they've made documentaries about it. And he was instrumental in legitimizing the whole thing. He gave his life and his career, everything, to make a stand about that, because there was too many people having private meetings. This was before anything really new about abductions, because I was talking to Bud Hopkins and Betty Hill and Virgil Armstrong. These names most people don't know, and they already knew what was going on, and they were so moved and affected by it that they didn't care what anybody thought anyway. Uh, if you take the character Richard Dreyfuss from Close Encounters, that's what happened to me. I literally went sort of crazy thinking about it, what was going on with me, like that. That happened to a lot of people before the internet, and people really didn't get to see that, about what it did to culture behind the scenes, and how it changed families. And I was lucky enough to be introduced to Andrea Bowart during this whole time. He was working for CIA, and he was contracted to study all this psychic phenomena that he was interested. He was responsible for bringing Uri Geller into the United States. And then right during that time, SRI was developing remote viewing, and there's a lot of people behind the scenes, Hal Puthoff and so forth. They were at SRI while they were testing cold fusion and prepare that. The same lab that verified all that was SRI, and they verified the remote viewing thing. Of course, that was done by Ingo Swann and other people that developed that. But Marianne Shenefield, which nobody's ever heard of, she was pivotal behind the scenes because she could remote view into anything. She was working for remote viewing into cells for medicine companies.
Wow.
And remote viewing into your DNA. She could look at it and draw it and describe it and say what was unique about it. She could look into you at nighttime. She wasn't limited by distance, but she could see your color schematics from the other side of the country. Most of the time that I knew her, all she needed from me was a voice trace.
How did she get this capacity?
That was from the contact that she had with her. She didn't really call it an abduction. It was an interface that were like very small beings that looked Asian, and she was playing out in the field, and they met with her that way. And they took her into a craft, and they said that she got onto a table, and they were very childlike, and they put her on a table, and she could see inside her body, all of it, and they were looking at it. And there were repercussions after that, because they said they must have put her out because she started to lose all of her vision. This was a very important case, because there hadn't been anybody that had been augmented like that before. So she lost her vision and then started to see a completely different way. So if you're sitting with a blind person, you say, go pick that up, you throw it over there, they'll hear it, right? And they may get close and see it and pick it up. But most people are not going to know where it is because they can't see it, but she could. So she had psychiatrists and ophthalmologists. They could not understand how she could see because her whole eyes were fried. There was no, the cone related to the light coming in was gone.
Did her vision come back eventually?
No, it never did.
Wow.
It never did. So she used that for all sorts of R&D behind the scenes, including remote viewing into a cell.
Was she being used by the CIA or military?
No, they couldn't, because she could see them over the phone. So when she's calling and you're talking on the phone with her, she knows who else is listening, and she can describe them at that time. And
so how did we learn about her? Who gave the transmission?
That was Andrea Bowart. There's two people behind the scenes that are the most influential. Uri Geller is the most famous. Everybody knows him, the Israeli spoonbender guy. And then there was Marianne Shenefield. That was the female version of him. Totally different personalities. Marianne was very private. Uri was very public. And they were doing... they were testing him in the labs for telepathy, psychokinesis, and all this other stuff. He's a very controversial guy. but he couldn't fake the telepathy stuff. They couldn't figure that part out. They couldn't also figure out why he could look into somebody's house and look at top secret documents as somebody else is reading them through their eyes. But so could she. But she didn't want to get involved with all of that stuff. She was more interested into researching genetics and seeing where you're from, because she's told me that the certain species, they check you out based on your genetics to locate you. Because she said there's different types of species that are communicating differently, and they're a different stratosphere of authority as well. And she was very distinct about that. So I tried to produce her movie. I tried to publish her book with lots of different people. I introduced her to lots of people, and none of it ever was finalized because of story rights and greed, and everybody wanted her story, and it never came out. There's a couple of interviews online about her from colleagues of her that knew her, but nobody could knew how to label what it is that she was doing, because when you're talking to people that are advanced in mathematics or physics, and you put her on the phone with them, because I did that. I did it with Brian Greene, actually. That guy I had to write to him and explain myself and get them two to talk. So she wanted him to explain the mathematics she was seeing while she's on the phone with him. So she would say, I see this, and then what's that mean? And then he would talk, and then we'd go back and forth. And this was happening with scientists and physicists all the time. She did a lot of the consulting for Hoagland regarding the face on Mars. Mm-hmm. And there is credit to her, and she was doing lots of R&D in hyperspace, quantum, and she used it. In fact, the NFL was influenced by her. One of the most famous coaches in the NFL, his career was built by her. Believe it or not, I know, because I was on the phone with that NFL coach, and I was there doing those experiments during games.
What kind?
We were doing, under her direction, sort of like creating a probable future, putting energy into that future, but doing it through the filters of language and color with archetypes. That's how she did it. She said these certain archetypes, when they're mixed with certain colors and you visualize them, influence events. And one of the real famous NFL coaches, his career was changed by her. Nobody knows about it, though. I haven't faced off with that guy yet, because he was kind of recruited as a spy, and nobody knows about it. But I know who the coach is. He was influenced by her and others behind the scenes that were utilizing her skills the same way some people have used Uri Geller for finding gold or silver. That's how he became rich, is through dowsing.
Interesting.
That because he was highly criticized because nobody thought he could bend the spoons or whatever. Right. But there was during that time with both of them, is they were having extraterrestrial contact. It's written in books already with Spectra and the 9. They were called the 9. It's online. People know about that. I dealt with the 9 with her. She introduced me to the 9, and that's how I met Paharch. And all of that tech. I gave it to Walter for him to figure out what to do with, because I didn't know what to do with it at that point, because we were creating the development of spectrum analysis, she called it, and the utilization of color, frequency, sound, and archetype to alter futures, alter a personal future or an outside event, which you could say prayer could do the same thing. It is prayer. Like, what is prayer? It's concentrated, focused energy through a medium.
Yeah. Manifestation.
Yes. So if people really understood, you hear the power of prayer. Well, yeah, it is. But if you really believed it and knew how powerful it was, you can change things. And we've heard those stories many times about that happening. She was doing a different form of it in a advanced physics way. And most of the scientists that I introduced her to, they were speechless because they couldn't understand how she had no education. She was a young girl that was in her late 60s when I met her, living in Ottawa, Massachusetts. So there's a lot of these things going on that you never hear about.
And what is it that you think aliens want?
Well,
or are doing, or what are we doing interacting with them, and who knows about it, who doesn't, as far as governments or secret space programs?
There was the gentleman that was the defense minister of Canada.
Right.
I spent some time with him at a conference, and his name slips my mind, but he was the former defense minister of Canada that found out the details of how many species, which species, and what's really going on behind the scenes. And I spoke with him in Europe at a conference because I was doing a speech regarding cold fusion and and I made some announcements there. And Russell Means was supposed to be there. He died a week before. It wasn't a happy event for me, but I met this gentleman there, and he knew my background, and he said he counted over 80 species, and that the planet basically is like a lab and a school, kind of mixture of a school and a lab, and that our biology and genetics have been influenced from advanced intelligence, basically.
And then where does that lead when you think of the people that are trying to do the Great Reset and all this power dynamic? How does that correspond with this intelligent life forms?
Well,
how can that coexist?
I don't know. I know other people that have pieces of it, and I believe them to be accurate, but I can't tell you specifically why, other than I have access to quite a number of people that are giving me information about what's getting ready to go down. And because we're at a sort of transition point with our species where we're kind of suiciding potentially. And I talked to a really high level guy 48 hours ago, and he just basically said, we're going to need an intervention. We're not mature enough to deal with what's about to happen, and we're being walked into a really dangerous place, and our leaders are not aware or educated about this event, and part of it has to do with the brain-computer interface thing, and I think it's related to stuff Northrop Skunk Works is doing, and McDonnell Douglas and Boeing and all the big defense contractors that have unlimited amounts of money that have this type of tech, which they're keeping for themselves to have tactical advantage over other countries until they can get into a position of dominance. But I don't think that's going to work because there's other influences like Val Thor.
Not sure what that is.
Anybody look up that name, Val Thor? And I think that person and other intelligence are involved in what's happening right now as these big technological changes happen, because we're very immature to have such advanced technologies when we barely get along with each other still. and we're allowing such violence and this very low grade behavior. So I think that other species are involved. I wouldn't have said any of that on audio or video years ago, because it would have been that guy's really crazy.
Yeah.
But not now. It's okay now, because that's pretty
fascinating.
tame compared to.
Well, yeah, if you go on Danny Jones now, it's like common language,
Yeah.
which is amazing, because just 10 years ago, like you said, you'd be a complete schizophrenic.
Yeah, because people were really paranoid and scared of anybody knowing about that stuff, and it was all met in quiet rooms. And
you're afraid for your life or for your reputation. Or
back then, now I don't really care, because the everyday person can't deny that it's part of the culture. And when you have people testifying before Congress and senators talking about it and Congress people talking about it, now it seems to be it's okay to talk about. But
I wish I could just give this podcast to Danny Jones, someone that has more views, so you can be heard by more people, because you're going to get a lower view count, but maybe not. Maybe it's just the tip of, that's how he gets you on, or somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
just happy it's preserved.
Oh yeah, I'm just here helping out. I don't have all the answers. I've got certain experience, and it's unique.
But it really gives people this new ability, I think, because most people actually are going to hear a lot of this for the first time.
Some of this,
and then it just gives you a doorway to look and go, there's a there.
Yeah, there. Hopefully, because the only reason to do this ever, to me, is that somebody will see it or hear it, and they'll, oh, really? And then, and do their research themselves and come to their own conclusions.
Right.
However way they wish to do it.
And just start to question authority and reality.
That's the biggest part, is they have to take back their original power back and authority back, and stop looking to outsiders to dictate and sculpt your value system, because it really comes down to values. Because I remember I was in a room with three other guys, one military guy, Walter Bowart, and myself, and we were all looking at David Icke's book, and oh, he got that from us, and oh, this is right, and he forgot to put this part, and this is like one of his first books. But everybody in the room, when we were looking at his book, we're I thought he was, and I still think he's incredibly courageous to have come out and said the things he did 30 years ago, talking about the child abuse and pedophilia and all that. Nobody was doing that. We weren't even doing that.
Right.
He did. So I will always respect that, for the courage that he had to come out and do that in front of everybody, and everybody make fun of him and criticize him,
right,
and all of that stuff, because that's
he was fearless.
Totally, because he'd already been through the vanishing point, and part of him coming out in public and going through all that was because of ayahuasca. So I heard about it, and I was at one point asked to be the U.S. correspondent of his network when he built he built a network, and then it was infiltrated and the whole thing collapsed, and I met him in London about it, and they wanted me to be the U.S. correspondent for it. So I did get to meet, I don't know him very well because I haven't spent a lot of time personally with him, but we were there. Walter Bowart and Fletcher Prouty knew about it, and we were all looking at it as like one of his books and evaluating and saying, okay, he forgot this part, he got this from us, and he got this, and wow, and look at this, and really the royals or aliens, and we're looking at, examining all of that, and these are high level people looking at him because they're the a lot of the information regarding the child abuse and the fashion in which they were doing it hadn't really been released to the public yet, because the kind of FBI director that was the expert on that retired. he confirmed it for us, and other police people did. But we noticed something really interesting, that when the police or law enforcement would come in and bust those things, they'd be permanently changed by visualizing and seeing it. The visual aspect of it altered the law enforcement that interfaced with it, which I found very interesting, because they almost became disassociative after they had to deal with it.
The trauma from it.
Yeah, just coming in to clean up a mess. They weren't actively involved. They're investigating the crime. When they interface with it, it alters something in them. And we noticed this. Walter and I noticed this, and I talked about with other shrinks and whatnot about it, what their clients would come in, and a lot of them were some of the law enforcement ones that dealt with that there's something to do with the participation or observation of that traumatizes, even if you're not doing it, you're just observing it. And which is an interesting thing we discovered.
Wow.
About that.
What was your overarching, I guess, lessons from Operation Mind Control with Walter? Like, what would you say the grand narrative is for you? Like, what do you think?
That if we don't have freedom, we can't have evolution. And part of our evolution has to do with expressing ourselves and speaking freely. Like, you see all this stuff about freedom of speech and everything, and we know you can't say this, but conflict resolution is resolved by free speech.
Right.
If we have a conflict and we can't have dialogue about it, then it's not resolved.
Or if we can't know about it.
That too. So I've always, and freedom has always been of utmost importance to me. Whether it's for simple things of being able to go wherever I want, when I want, think what I want, when I want. I think that's our inherent right. And the most important thing of impending on the sort of battlefield that we're at, and that freedom ultimately we're going to have to fight for it, and we're going to have to make a stand, like now, like right now. I would. A lot of people say, "Oh, you don't want to talk in the press," and da 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 da. And no, I don't, but I will if it's necessary and needed at a certain point to come in and kind of shake things up a bit, which I will do, so that people can see and look from a different angle and do something about it. Because I think the danger that we're in when we fuse with these machines, we will lose an aspect of our humanity. To me, having traveled all over the world and seen quite a bit, we really don't know each other very well at all. I mean, I spend a lot of time in Europe, in France specifically, and we really don't know those people or understand them at all. We think of their modern society, and they are, but they're very different from us. And when I think about other cultures in Asia or Japan or something, I think that we really need to get to know each other much better. And the one thing I do like about the podcasting thing is that it's a counterpoint to the effect of instantaneousness, because long form conversations to build bridges between minds will save us if we're allowed to continue to talk freely, openly, without the concern or worry about being edited or judged or whatever. Because if somebody has a problem with a group of people or an action that's going on, I think they should be allowed to speak freely exactly how they feel about it.
Right.
So we can know why, where it came from, how it happened, how it can be resolved. And I don't see a lot of that.
And people need to have the desire to want to listen.
Exactly.
The attention span and the curiosity.
Yes. And I give Joe Rogan credit because his claim to fame isn't what he's asked or what he said. What he's done, and his real claim to fame, is that he instituted and slowed down the effect of instantaneous and extended the long form conversation. And he's very good at it, because that long form communication has allowed people to learn who they are, where they came from, why they're saying that, why are they concluding this opinion that they have that may be right or wrong, and where it comes from. And I think ultimately, if you have the freedom to do that, you can make better decisions, and you'll get along better with people from different cultures that have been cultural conditioning and so forth, and all the mess that we've allowed. That's the one thing that I think that the most important thing he's done, because there's a lot of stuff that he's completely missed, and he doesn't have it right at all. But it's become now, the larger you become, the more potentially dangerous you become, for infiltration, for political posturing, for this, for that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the long form communication is a counter to the text, to the short sentence, to the little advert, to the short messaging advertisement thing that's supposed to impact you to think differently. This is where it's at. What I notice in Europe and versus what I notice in America, there is still community over there, and it's organic community. People know each other and talk to each other in the street. There's not a wall between the two of them via electronics. They know their butcher, they know the barkeeper, they know everybody in town, and it's a much more community thing. That is lost here. That is totally almost non-existent in the United States, and I think it's sad. And that's one of the great things about Europe, is they have that. We don't have that here. That we don't have the cohesion we used to. I think that was here in the 50s, and I would love to see that return, and it's possible that it will, because I think a lot of people are very lonely, very isolated, dissatisfied, strictly driven by their need for attention, their need for media validation, their need to be noticed, because they're being vaporized. Their identity is being vaporized by these technologies. It has an effect on our identity and how we interrelate that never gets any attention or discussed. It's just business as usual.
Yeah.
So,
the harvesting of attention.
Yeah, it's the harvesting of attention. I mean, when you have communications set up the way they are now, and because they're about to change again, and you manage to get 5, 10, 6, 7 million people in a closed space, whether it's on a podcast listening or news or an event, that's not only is that energy harvested, it's utilized by the enemy in many cases, because Walter and I and other people, I didn't do too much of this, but I saw all the data. We've studied a lot of cult accessing cues and how cults function. CIA is very interested in cults. They spend a lot of time. They create them, they infiltrate them, they exfiltrate them, and they report in their findings about group dynamics, group cohesion, group thinking, leadership within the group, how it functions, all of those things, because they want to be able to control a crowd. So I know people that were in cults, and sadly, when they get out of them, they only identify themselves as having been in one, instead of being a person. No, they're this that happened to them. And we're seeing this with, churches being attacked, Scientology being attacked, other cult religions but these were used as petri dishes for behavioral science. That's what they're used for. Like the thing that Manson went through during that whole thing, you had a guest talking about CIA utilization of him using that whole thing. That was sanctioned and allowed to happen because they wanted to see how culture would be formed based upon this guy. He didn't actually kill anybody himself, but he orchestrated.
And he was being used.
Yes, and he was being used. Yes, as and easy to throw away the keys.
And there's a lot of that going on today.
Yes, it is. It's a very like the P. Diddy case. Having lived in L.A., to me, that is old news. A lot of people knew that was going on, and the exposure of that merely states and says that you've got a lot of people that get involved with that industry that have zero self-esteem, none. It's probably a prerequisite to get involved. You have to have no self-esteem and be willing to sell your body and your soul for some attention, and that is capitalized upon.
And that's now OnlyFans and Instagram and
all of it,
influencer
all
culture,
of it, all of it, because
which is all a weapon of mass distraction.
Yes, I'm in Europe, and people will part the Red Sea for you in Europe if you have 500,000 followers. They'll give you deals at hotels. They'll invite you to eat for free. They'll be invited to parties. Now, all of that can be faked anyway. Right. The numbers can be faked. I mean, everything on there can be faked.
Right.
And algorithms and how many viewers and followers and all of it can be faked. Right. And we're being played badly. I see all of that eventually.
It's like dangling carrots.
Yeah, it's all going to implode and fall apart. I can see that remnants of that happening now.
Yeah.
Until when they bring in 6G, it'll completely change.
Especially with AI, because you couldn't tell what's real influencer versus fake anyway.
Yeah, not with voice clones.
Yeah.
When you're utilizing a fan-based platform, they can voice clone. They can have AI response. You don't even know who you're talking to. There's people advertising products or people that you buy a subscription to and have a fake relationship with somebody that doesn't even exist, and they're responding in real time, back and forth, and then they're tracking all your language, what you respond, how fast you respond,
and making it better,
and keep coming back. And there's people just feeding into that loop, and there's people making money off of it and bragging to everybody that they've got 3 women that work for them, and they're not even human, and they're working on AI. And I just saw this whole story about that, and I'm like, okay, this is where we're at now.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we might do a round 2 while you're in town, but I've lost my voice so much. It's so weird for this conversation. But if you were going to die after this was over and this was the last thing you could say to the world, what would you want to say to the world? Anything you'd want to share with the world?
I'd say, sounds cheesy, but experience love and focus on making beautiful memories with that foundation. And there covers many forms, but make that emphasize that focus. Because when you do leave here, all you have is your memories, and the residual of your memories you're going to take with you when you shed this skin, because you don't die at all. But you launch from that next place you go into with those memories, and there should be an emphasis on service, love, understanding. It sounds totally cheesy, but we were talking about death earlier and people dying, that happening all the time. And having seen it and heard about it, nobody talked about having houses and Ferraris and Bentleys and 58 porn star girlfriends and whatever the hell it was. None of them say that. None of them. Not one that I've heard. It was about the experiences that they had with key people that filled this place.
The connection.
Yeah, because the heart of the matter is a matter of the heart at the end of the day, really. All this other stuff, really doesn't matter, because you came in alone and you're going to leave alone. And what you do in between should have some heart to it, I say. So that's what I would say to that, actually.
I really love that. And that's coming from Howard's messaging. I feel like someone we mutually learned from and witnessed, who is very heart-centered.
Yeah, I think that's really it, because when Walter was dying, he was like my best friend and teacher and comrade. He told me these things. Make sure you do this. Don't worry about this. Put your focus here, because when you get to that place where you're gonna do the bridge to the next place and you shed this skin, that's the residual that you're taking with you in there. So everybody does their forgiveness and says what they want like 10 hours before they die.
But you got karma behind you.
Yeah, you really should say those things a little bit before you actually leave, because you drag that residue, yes, into that next place where you go, which is the plants showed me and told me, and I learned from other people that I know what it's like. I know what it's like with death when you're not here. And I know what to expect, and I know who will be there, and I know that life goes on. And the key point, I talked to a Vedic priest about it, and he said, after reading the Upanishads and studying the whole Vedic thing, he goes, the most critical point in life is birth, death, insemination when pregnancy happens through sex, and death. Those points, key moments, because of the state of consciousness at the departure. And that state of consciousness should, for your own good, should be set in a certain way. Because the next time you take a body, if you decide to, that is what comes in next. So I always go back to the monologue of the movie K-Pax. At the very end of the movie, the alien guy does a little monologue about getting it right this time, and about making the right decision, and giving your heart to the matter when it counts, and do it. Otherwise, you'll have to do it again and again and again. And he says you want to get it right this time. So that's what I would have to say about that.
It's beautiful. I appreciate the time. And I really do appreciate you.
Oh, thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the episode. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes, and rate the show. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
What we call reality is in fact nothing more than a culturally sanctioned and linguistically reinforced hallucination.